Chapter 39. An ear-piercing whistle pierced through the air, completely breaking the tranquility of the glacier mountains. The steel train that had lost control rushed forward, billowing thick smoke. Its speed on the tracks continued to soar without any signs of slowing down. Steve messed up? Cale raised his eyebrows. He was about to climb onto the roof and rush to the front of the train. However, when he saw that the train was about to enter the cave tunnel that only allowed the train to pass through, he quickly retreated back into the carriage and closed the door. As the train entered the tunnel, the light in the carriage dimmed. Only a faint light remained. Cale looked at the tunnel in the carriage. There were automatic mechanical doors installed at both ends of the tunnel, but they had been completely locked by the main control room. He could not care less. As Cale thought about it, a translucent blue item card appeared between his two fingers. In the next moment, an energy laser gun quickly returned to its original form and was held in his hand. He aimed the gun at the tightly shut door of the carriage and pulled the trigger. Chi! The locked mechanical door was immediately shattered by the laser. Cale held the energy laser gun and walked through the tunnel, quickly rushing to the control room at the front of the train. Chi, chi, chi. The sealed doors of the train were forcefully blown away by Cale's energy laser gun. The carriages he passed by were in a mess. We should be there soon. Kyle looked at the fifth door. He aimed the energy laser gun at the door and fired again. The steel mechanical door was melted by the laser, and the explosion of energy blew away the thick smoke in front of the driver's compartment. This is... When the tragic scene in the control room came into view, even Cale could not help but widen his eyes in shock. On both sides of the control room, there were huge holes in the steel exterior of the train. They could see the walls of the tunnel and the sparks from the wheels as they passed by quickly outside. The floor of the control room was covered in blood and broken bones, as if someone had committed suicide by suicide. The thick smoke and fire came from the control room of the train. Steve sat on the floor of the carriage tiredly. Beside him was a bald professor who had fainted. Cale recognized him as the target of this operation. Cale, you're here. Steve raised his head and looked at Cale. He clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked, as if he was enduring great pain. What happened here? How did this happen? Are you injured? Cale threw away the energy laser gun in his hand and quickly stepped forward to help him up. He seemed to have realized something and asked, "Right, where's Baki?" "It's all my fault. I underestimated them." Steve sighed. He could not suppress his sadness and said, "Baki. In order to save me, he was thrown out of the train by the explosive wind pressure of the bomb on the train driver and fell into the bottom of the snowy mountain valley hundreds of meters high. Did he suffer the same fate?" Winter Soldier. Cale's expression did not change. He knew that although Baki was not dead, his future would be more painful than death. He had been controlled by the other country's government as a war machine devoid of humanity for more than half a century. Cale was not good at comforting people. He could only pat Steve on the shoulder and say, "Take it easy. As a soldier, sacrifice is common on the battlefield. Don't let this affect the mission." "I know." Steve took a deep breath and carried the unconscious bald doctor on his shoulder. He said, "But the mission is completed. The target wanted to bite the poison capsule in his mouth and commit suicide. I knocked him out. It seems that the information is correct. The members of the Hydra organization like to hide poison in their mouth and commit suicide." Cale nodded and said thoughtfully, "Now we just need to take the target and evacuate from here safely." "That's the problem." A bitter smile appeared on Steve's resolute face. He pointed to the bridge that was covered in thick smoke and flames. That powerful explosion not only blew up the steel body on both sides of the carriage, but also destroyed the control panel of the train. Now the train is constantly accelerating and out of control. Indeed, the train should be traveling at more than 150 km/h now, and it's still accelerating. It's impossible to stop. Kale looked at the sparks splashing on the wheels and quickly thought about countermeasures. At such a fast speed, even if he jumped from the train, his life would be in danger, not to mention the cliffs on both sides of the train. If it was only one person, he could use the forced teleportation of sneak directly. But there was also Steve and a target hostage. It would not work at all. Steve gave his own suggestion. It seems that we can only go to the rear of the train and separate the connection between the front and rear of the train. I hope this will stop the train. Kale shook his head and said, "You think too much, if I remember the map of the nearby glaciers correctly. As soon as the train leaves this long and straight mountain tunnel, it will turn immediately. At this speed, even if the front of the train is separated from the carriage will still have no time to stop before it derails and falls." Steve asked with a dignified face, "What should we do? We can't do nothing and just wait for the train to derail and fall, right?" Kale was silent for a moment, then suddenly stared at Steve and asked, "Do you trust me?" "Ah." Steve was stunned for a moment, then he answered without hesitation, "Of course. In this world, if I don't trust you, who else can I trust?" "Then don't do anything." Kale smiled mysteriously. After making the decision, he relaxed a lot, and his face relaxed without any sense of crisis. He said with certainty, "When the train rushes out of the tunnel, the moment it derails and falls, I tell you to jump, and you take the hostage and jump off the cliff in the valley." "Jump off the cliff?" Steve looked at Kale in surprise, still confused. The bottom of the cliff valley was not a deep river, but a hard frozen river. "Don't you trust me?" Kale shrugged. "Okay, if you tell me to jump, I'll jump." Steve did not ask. He carried the hostage on his shoulder and was ready to face the wall of the tunnel. In just a few seconds, the train reached the end of the tunnel at a speed of more than 200 kilometers per hour. The darkness was instantly dissipated by the daylight outside. The glaring white light outside made Steve squint his eyes involuntarily. At the same time, the train also trembled violently, and the wheels completely cracked under the splashing of sparks. Crack! The whistling train was supposed to turn according to the track, but under the excessive speed, it suddenly derailed from the track at the corner of the track and rushed toward the hanging cliff. The cold wind and snow poured into the carriage crazily, and the feeling of weightlessness of the train that was about to fall spontaneously arose. "Steve, jump!" Before Kale finished his words, he had already jumped out of the carriage. Chapter 40. Hundreds of meters above the bottom of the glacier valley, Kale and Steve, who was holding the hostage, fell quickly against the cold wind and snowflakes. A dozen train carriages not far from them also burst and rolled down the mountain. Falling from such a high altitude, he had experienced many parachuting experiences, but this time he didn't wear any parachuting tools. The physique of a super soldier, no matter how high, was only in the range of the most perfect human strength, and the range of tolerance for fatal crises was only 3 to 5 times that of a normal human. Falling from a cliff hundreds of meters high, this should be a situation of certain death. The moment before he jumped out of the carriage, Steve still didn't understand how to escape in such a situation. But Steve still jumped down without hesitation, because Kyle had been creating miracles since the beginning of the training base. He was like a pioneer, leading and guiding him forward. More importantly, he believed in Kale, and that was enough. Kale himself didn't think as much as Steve. After he jumped out of the carriage, he opened his hands with his face facing the sky, as if waiting for something. At this moment, 10,000 meters above the glacier mountain range. Whoosh! A light blue beast shadow broke through the atmospheric clouds at high speed, its sharp golden eagle eyes looked down, its huge wings full of feathers suddenly shrank, and its head dived to the ground. It was like an arrow, its speed breaking the sound barrier in a short moment, leaving a series of white circles in the sky. "It's here." A smile appeared on Kyle's face when he saw the thin hole in the clouds in the sky. He had already summoned the Blue Eagle during this time and let the Blue Eagle scout in the sky within a few miles of his body, creating an exclusive personal air defense field. After all, he was now a major threat to the German army and the Hydra organization. A month ago, the enemy had sent fighter jets into the battlefield, dropping mines to kill him and Steve. The Blue Eagle's flying maneuverability was extremely strong, and in a one-on-one situation, a single fighter jet would be destroyed by its sharp claws before it could see its trace. The creatures summoned by the creature card would have intimacy, obedience, and a subtle telepathic connection with the card holder. However, in order to keep the creature card in a summoned state for a long time, it would need to be fed daily. "What's here?" Steve asked in surprise. His eyes were fixed on the ground below. His continuous descent made the ground at the bottom of the valley fly past his field of vision. Before Kale could open his mouth to explain, in the next moment, a huge shadow shrouded their bodies, accompanied by a strong wind pressure. Chirp! The Blue Eagle let out a loud cry. It flapped its wings and quickly approached. First, it used its body to catch Kale. Then, it used one of its claws to grab Steve and the hostage. "My God, what kind of bird is this?" Steve was shocked. He turned around to look at the Blue Eagle, whose wingspan was at least 10 meters wide, and opened his mouth wide in shock. Chirp chirp. The Blue Eagle glanced at Steve, who was on its claws. Its blue feathered wings flapped downwards, completely shredding the wind and snow below, forming a small area hurricane that rushed into the sky. Steve was a little confused. He said hesitantly, "Why do I feel like I'm being despised by it?" Kale sat on the Blue Eagle's neck and said, "It's considered an eagle. It's very smart. It has the IQ of a 10-year-old human child. I've never seen such a big eagle." Steve knew that they were out of danger and relaxed a lot. He smiled bitterly and said, "Also, why are you sitting on its back? Why are you sitting on it? I'm going to be caught in its claws." "Well." Kale paused as if he was lost in his memories. He began to make up a story and said, "I met it when I was young in the forest on the mountain. At that time, the Blue Eagle was the same size as a normal eagle. Later, it was infected by a radioactive drug in a factory, and its body mutated. Not only did its feathers change color, but it also became bigger and bigger." "I see." Steve nodded. He didn't have any doubts or questions. He directly acquiesced to Kale's words. "Steve, I hope that when you go back, you won't tell anyone about the Blue Eagle, including Carter." Kale stroked the feathers on the Blue Eagle's head and said, "The Blue Eagle won't hurt humans. It only eats the beasts on the mountain. If some people with bad intentions know about its existence, they might try to hunt it down." "Okay, I won't tell anyone." Steve agreed without hesitation. Kale also secretly sighed in relief. The Blue Eagle was still too early to appear in the world of Marvel. After the 21st century, all kinds of mutations and technology emerged. Gods like Thor and Loki from myths and legends would travel around Earth for a few days. With the addition of alien magic to expand the minds of people on Earth, the existence of the Blue Eagle wouldn't be so surprising. After the Blue Eagle took the 3 people out of the valley, it landed them in the area around the snowy mountain. It then flapped its wings and disappeared between the clouds. Kale and Steve took the target hostage and rushed to the predetermined location. They met up with Frey's team and then returned to the base. That night, in the base's basement operations department, the large battle map was like wallpaper. It was pasted all over the wall. Among them was the battle map of the enemy's factory base. The 6 flagpole areas were circled with crosses, indicating that the enemy had been annihilated. "That's it." Staff Sergeant Baki Baines fell to the bottom of the snowy mountain during a mission and died. The target hostage has now been handed over to the professionals at the base for interrogation. The Hydra organization is now separated from the German army. According to the information we know, the leader of Hydra, Red Skull, also has a mysterious item that can create unlimited energy. Do we need to snatch it? I still remember the hatred of Red Skull. Of course, even if we don't make unlimited energy, we can't let such a dangerous organization like Hydra abuse it at will. On a combat desk with focused lights, Kale, Steve, Carter, and the colonel officer of the base's commander-in-chief sat in chairs and discussed. Major Kale, Lieutenant Steve. Please get ready. The colonel looked sternly at Kale and Steve opposite him and said sincerely, if we learn the whereabouts of Red Skull from the target of this mission, we will have to rely on you to attack with a shield and a sword. The shield represents the justice and protection of the United States, and the sword represents the strength and killing of the United States. Kale and Steve's military ranks are not low, but they are not very high, but their prestige and reputation in the country are far above some generals and officers. Therefore, at this time, the commander-in-chief and colonel officer of the base did not have any arrogance and treated them as equals. Steve nodded in response. Understood, I will prepare in advance. Once there is news, we will leave immediately. The target is Red Skull. You don't have to say that, I will insist on going. Kale said coldly. Chapter 41. Late at night, in the single officer's room assigned to him by the base. Kale, who had just finished showering, was only wearing a pair of large underpants. His upper body was bare, and his back was against the bed. He was resting with his eyes closed in a semi-reclining position. Of course, he was not thinking about life or anything. Instead, he entered the card space with his mind. In the endless white space, compared to 2 months ago, there was a big difference. Previously, all the cards were mixed together and spun into a ball endlessly like a hurricane. After Kyle sorted it out, the 3 types of cards, ability, item, and creature, were now divided into different storage areas. In addition to the 3 main card classification areas, there were 2 other emergency card areas and a material card area. The emergency card area. That was to store cards that needed to be used directly in an emergency, such as Hound, Energy Laser Gun, Emergency Box, Blue Eagle, and so on. There was not a single ability card in the emergency card area because as long as the ability card was stored in the card space, it could be used directly. It did not need to be materialized like items and creature cards before it could be used. As for the material card area, it stored some useless item cards, which were the materials for the sacrificial card draw. Kale's mind entered the card space and headed for the material card area. After more than a month of plundering, most of the material cards looted from several fallen German factory bases were stored in the material card area. At this time, nearly 100 blue item cards and thousands of green item cards were densely piled up in the material card area. Looking at them gave him a sense of accomplishment. After storing the material cards for so long, it's time to try my luck. Kale took a deep breath and suppressed his usual nervousness of drawing cards. Many of Germany's energy factories had been completely destroyed. In addition, the decisive battle with Red Skull was imminent. At this point, there was not much point in continuing to store cards. Kale began to count the number of item cards in the material card area and quickly came up with an accurate number. Green item cards, 1,020 pieces. Blue item cards, 86 pieces. Converted to the number of sacrificial card draws, green quality cards could be drawn 102 times and blue quality cards could only be drawn 8 times. Then, let's start with the green ones. Kale waved his hand and selected the 10-20 green item cards floating in the material card area. Selection successful. Sacrifice the draw card. 102 consecutive draws. You have sacrificed German Premium Helmet, X26, German Combat Uniform, X11, High-Powered Sniper Rifle, X6. Reconnaissance Instrument, X3, Energy Magazine, X89. High Explosive Grenade, X22, Anti-Infantry Mine, X9, Successful Draw. Congratulations on obtaining, Add Life, X11, Genuine Dual Blade Mastery, Radio, Rabbit, Shark, Bronze Sword, Indian Proficiency. They were all new green cards, and the green light they emitted made Kale sigh. Bastard, this was a 102 consecutive draw. Do you dare to give me a blue quality card with a small probability? And these 100 new cards, most of them were useless cards. Other than some technological item cards that could be thrown to Howard for research, there were not many that could be of use. They gave me 11 rare green, Add Life, cards. Is this good luck or bad luck? Kale's mouth twitched. Add Life increases the user's natural lifespan by 3 years. Green rare ability card. Current status, can be used on others. The green card's effect was obviously more obvious than the white one, increasing the lifespan from 3 months to 3 years. But Kale now had the physique of a super soldier, and his aging and natural lifespan had already reached a certain level, so the card did not have much effect on his body. This is the ability card drawn from the sacrifice. It can be used on others, interesting. Kale pondered. This card did not mean much to him, but its value to ordinary people was shocking. Let's leave it for now. It will definitely be useful in the future. Kale stopped thinking and his gaze fell on the only other rare green card other than, Add Life. True Dual Sword Mastery, proficient in the sword skills of the Dual Sword Sect. Green rare ability card. It's barely a pass. Kale shrugged helplessly. After all, he did not pin his hopes on the green quality card. The focus of the night was the next 8 blue quality card draws. Let's do it again and again, I can't stand it anymore. Kale took a deep breath and suppressed his anxiety. First, he slowly selected 10 blue item cards. Sacrifice, draw. You've sacrificed, Gem Energy, X10. Draw successful, congratulations on obtaining, Add Life. Damn, it's another Add Life card? The moment he heard the card draw message, Kale almost cursed. What was with the card draw tonight? Was the card draw system afraid that he would die too quickly? Add Life increases the user's natural lifespan by 30 years. Blue rare ability card. Current status, can be used on others. Simple, crude, no side effects, an ability card that could directly increase one's natural lifespan by 30 years. 30 years? Kale was also a little surprised. He thought that the blue rare, Add Life, would only increase one's lifespan by 10 years at most. He did not expect it to increase so much. If this goes on, as long as I don't die, I can live until the destruction of the earth. Kale smiled bitterly and continued with the sacrifice card draw. Although the lifespan is solid enough, please give me something more solid. As Kale screamed in his heart, 10 blue item cards were sacrificed again and disappeared. Draw successful, congratulations on obtaining, Submarine. Is this useful or not? Kale was a little sad as he looked at it. He did not stop and continued with the card draw. Draw successful, congratulations on obtaining, Disguise Voice Changer. God, what do I need this voice changer for? Draw again. Draw successful, congratulations on obtaining, Add Life. Very good, give me more lifespan tonight. Continue. Draw successful, congratulations on obtaining, Conan's Glasses. Kale was speechless. What the hell is this? Draw again. Draw successful, congratulations on obtaining, Senzu Bean. Senzu Bean? Kale suddenly became spirited and quickly took the newly drawn blue card. Senzu Bean, a bean planted by Corinne. As long as it is consumed, no matter how serious the injury is, even if the person is close to death, it can still restore the body to its peak state. Blue item card. This is not bad, it can save my life. Kale revealed a smile and divided the Senzu Bean into the emergency card area. Tonight's draw was not in vain. Kale saw that there were still 2 blue quality card draw chances left. He waved his hand and simply selected all the remaining 20 blue item cards. You have sacrificed, Gem Energy, X20 at least, can I get another blue skill type card? As soon as Kyle thought of this, 2 new cards gradually emerged from the card space. One was dark blue, and the other was purple, which he had never seen before. The dazzling light emitted by the 2 cards instantly became the focus of the card space. Chapter 42. My luck has exploded. The moment the purple card was drawn, Kale's mind went blank, and he felt a little dizzy from the immense joy. This happiness came too suddenly, and it was impossible to guard against. He was not mentally prepared at all. After being dazed for a moment, Kale's thought incarnation quickly grabbed the purple card and looked at the card information. Super large ancient dragon turtle, a super large sea monster that existed in ancient times. Its appearance is similar to a snapping turtle. Purple creature card. Its natural lifespan is tens of thousands of years. Its defense is amazing and can easily resist the bombardment of large firearms. It has a gentle personality and low combat ability. Its movement speed on land is extremely slow, and its speed on water is the speed of a normal speedboat. Its biggest characteristic is that it is very large. Its width and length are over 2,000 meters. There are very few creatures in the universe that can be larger than it. Because of its large size, the ancient dragon turtle only enters Arabia once every 100 years to maintain its vitality through constant hibernation. It continues to eat the microorganisms in the ocean. Sometimes, it will sleep for several months, causing the turtle shell on its back to accumulate over time and become the base of a reef, forming a large tropical forest island. Current status: can only be summoned in areas with sufficient water resources. How is this a creature card? It's clearly a mobile island fortress. Kale exclaimed. Purple cards were indeed far superior to blue cards. The only flaw was that this was a creature card. If it was a purple ability card, it was hard to imagine how much it would increase his strength. Although he could continue drawing in the future, the energy factories in Germany had basically been wiped out, and there would be very few blue cards in the future. Perhaps for a long time in the future, this will be the only purple card in the card space. Kale sighed and placed the super large ancient dragon turtle at the top of the creature card area. His gaze naturally fell on another blue rare quality card, and as soon as he saw the name of the card, he was instantly dumbfounded. Initial symbiotic venom, a sentient alien symbiotic life form. It usually appears in liquid form. Venom needs to combine with a host to survive. It usually turns into clothes and wraps around the host, increasing the host's strength and abilities. It is extremely afraid of ultrasound and high temperatures. Its learning ability was extremely strong. It would constantly learn the host's language, personality, abilities, and so on. It would also grow rapidly as the host grew stronger. Current status: quick learning, transmogrification of scene clothes, defense against ordinary bullets, strong adaptability, liquid repair. Currently, the number of hosts it has shared a symbiotic relationship with, 0, the higher the number, the more powerful the venom will be. His mind withdrew from the card space. Kale leaned against the headboard and took out the initial symbiotic venom from the card space. He held it in his hand and looked at it blankly, not knowing what to do with it for a while. It's actually poison? Kale muttered to himself. He still understood this thing. In the Spider-Man independent movie in the Marvel world, Spider-Man was once occupied by a symbiotic body like Venom, affecting his mind and temperament to become Black Spider. It was hard to say whether the venom was harmful to the host. The characteristics of the symbiotic body placed it between good and evil. In particular, the initial venom was like a dry sponge that would absorb similar thoughts and abilities based on the host it had attached to. If the host was righteous, the venom would be righteous. If the host was evil, the venom would be evil. If the host was strong, the host would take the initiative. if the venom was strong, the venom would take the initiative. This was a symbiotic body, not a slave, not a master, but a liquid creature that signed a treaty of equal coexistence with the host. Because of this, Kale had a sense of worry. Venom was different from the blue eagle and the ancient dragon turtle. Its upper limit was too high. After it grows up, it may affect his temperament and thinking. However, I have no reason to be afraid of this card creature. Kale clenched the card, and his eyes were filled with firm confidence. Under the premise of being the host of Venom, he was also the card holder of Venom. Under the card drawing system, all creatures of the bio card must obey the instructions of the card holder. In the worst case, even if the creature of the bio card does not obey the card holder's orders, the card holder has a last resort, to forcibly draw the card. Within a certain distance, Kyle could forcefully extract all the creatures summoned from the creature card into a card and remake them into a new card. You are just the product of my sacrificial card draw. Then you can only be under me forever, and there will be no day when you become the master. Kale made a decision, and without any hesitation, he directly summoned the card in his hand into a physical creature. The next moment, there was a mass of elastic black liquid on his palm. Gurgle, the original Venom, was like a newborn creature, treating Kale as its mother. It covered his palms with the warm black liquid and moved back and forth to express its joy. It used a part of its own liquid to transform into black lines, intimately touching Kale's chest, abdomen, face, and more extended out of the bed, touching the military boots, the bed, the chair, the mirror, and the combat uniform on the hanger. Venom was like a baby, full of curiosity about everything in this world. You will be called Venom from now on, understand? Kale tried to open his mouth, and the liquid creature on his hand suddenly secreted more liquid, extending and covering his arm happily. Kale didn't want to be wrapped into a black mass, so he pointed to the combat uniform on the hanger and ordered, "Try transforming into that." Gurgle, Venom seemed to understand Kale's words, and an extended black line wrapped around the combat uniform. After a few seconds, the liquid body quickly covered Kale's body below the neck. Under Kale's gaze, Venom then transformed into the black combat uniform set by Howard at a speed visible to the naked eye, and there was no difference at all from the outside. This feeling. Kale suddenly got up from the bed, stretched his arms and tried to move. The combat uniform transformed by Venom was not only more comfortable, but there was also an exciting feeling of strength increase in his heart. His strength has increased by nearly 1/5. Kale secretly thought, clenching his fist covered by the Venom glove, he could clearly feel the obvious increase in his strength. This is still the initial Venom. After following him to the battlefield and adapting to the host's body growth, Venom will become more and more powerful. In the future, you need to maintain the transformation of the combat uniform outside, and you can't reveal your liquid form in front of others, understand? Kale warned, pulling the cross pattern on his chest, and the Venom combat uniform seemed to be highly fibrous and full of extensibility, and it bounced back playfully. The original combat uniform was actually of good quality, but every time he came back, he had to clean the bloodstains and stains, and Kale was used to using the vibranium arm guard on his right hand to block the energy laser, which often led to the need to let Howard repair the right sleeve of the combat uniform after returning from the war. Chapter 43. In the dead of night, the disciplined UA military base was silent in the dark night, but subtle movements continued to sound in an officer's single room. Under the dim yellow light, Kale wore the Venom transformed battle suit and did warm-up exercises in the single room, using the entire ironwood single bed as a barbell to adapt to his increased strength by lifting weights. With the rhythmic bulging of his abdominal muscles and the high-load exercise of his hands and feet constantly warming up, the battle suit gradually fit with the surface of Kale's body as the host, like a layer of black leather skin, clearly showing the muscular contours of the perfect body below. "Venom, you are very happy, right?" Kale said with a smile. Not only could he clearly feel the joy conveyed by Venom, but this joy also made him energetic and in a good mood. After Venom and the host fuse, their strength and emotions will intertwine, affect each other, and sublimate on the basis of this. Today is also the first day of Venom's birth, plus the first symbiotic fusion with the super soldier physique card holder. It was so excited that it couldn't stop. However, there is likely to be news of Red Skull's whereabouts tomorrow, and the mission is imminent, so I can't waste time with it. Kale exhaled a breath of hot air, put the single bed on the ground, and comforted the Venom battle suit. Okay, I will take you out for a walk tomorrow. If you continue like this, you won't be able to sleep tonight. Just as he was about to take off the Venom battle suit, there was a knock on the door. It's so late, who is looking for me? Kale was surprised and patted the Venom battle suit comfortingly before walking over to open the door. When he saw the young man in pajamas outside the door, he couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Steve, what are you doing here so late at night?" "I want to ask you the same thing. It's so late at night, you haven't slept yet, what are you doing in the room?" Steve yawned sleepily, his blonde hair was messy, and he had obviously just been woken up from his sleep. "By the way, the single room assigned to Steve is directly downstairs from my room on the second floor." Kale remembered and shrugged and said, "There was a cockroach in the room just now, I got up and killed it." "Are you sure you killed a cockroach?" Steve had a strange look on his face as he glanced at Kale's combat suit and said speechlessly, "If I didn't know, I would have thought that you just came back from the front battlefield." Kyle shrugged and said helplessly, "You know, I don't have any clothes to wear. Sometimes, I just sleep in my combat uniform. It's also convenient to be on standby at any time." "Okay. Go to bed early, we may take action tomorrow." After Steve finished speaking, he rubbed his sleepy eyes and returned to his room downstairs. After closing the door, Kyle breathed a sigh of relief. That was close. If Steve had entered the room and seen the original suit on the hanger, he wouldn't have known how to explain it. It's time, of course. Venom of venom of venom, of venom, of venom, 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 venom. Again? This time, Kale was more alert. He quickly extracted the combat suit from the hanger and turned it into a card before walking over to open the door. "Steve, what are you doing here instead of sleeping?" When he saw the person outside the door, his words stopped abruptly. "Carter? What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" Kale asked with the corner of his mouth twitched. That's right. The one who knocked on the door was Carter, wearing simple long-sleeved pajamas. Her neck revealed some white skin, and her short blonde hair casually and lazily draped over her shoulders. Compared with her coldness during the day, she had a different kind of charm. "Do you still want to sleep tonight?" Kale secretly complained. Seeing that Carter didn't speak, he directly asked, "Do you want to come in and sit?" "In your dreams." Carter rolled her eyes at him and turned to lean on the wooden railing of the corridor on the second floor. Her back seemed to blend into the night. "I have something to say to you." "Don't worry." Kale thought of something. He walked out of the corridor and leaned on Carter's side. Facing the starry night sky, he whispered, "Tomorrow is the same. No matter how many times, I will bring Steve back." Carter was silent for a moment. Her beautiful eyes glanced at Kale and said coldly, "Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to come back?" "Won't be able to come back?" Kale was slightly stunned. He shook his head and said, "I really haven't thought about this. Although I don't want to set a flag in advance, I still have some confidence in my own strength. This is not arrogance, but based on a certain understanding of the world of Marvel, and the estimation of the total strength of his own ability and equipment. Super soldier ability, physique, dozens of fighting skills, sodium carbon steel sword, vibrating gold arm guard, and the newly drawn Venom suit tonight. The rest of the life-saving Blue Eagle and Senzu Bean are not mentioned. If Red Skull is positioned as a villain at the current stage, Kale really doesn't put him in his eyes. Seeing a brainless wave of head-on attacks, let's see if he can block it." Carter continued, "It's good for people to have confidence, but there's always a chance. Kale, you always rush to the front so unscrupulously. Aren't you afraid that one day you will fall? Are you concerned about me? Are you afraid that I will die on the battlefield? Kale blinked in surprise. This woman seems a bit abnormal tonight. Of course. Carter nodded and admitted, to be exact, you are one of the candidates for me to record and perfect the super soldier data. If you don't come back, it will be a big loss for our army. I only have research value. I am now a major, an American hero. Show me some respect. Kale retorted. At the same time, he seemed to be aware that something was wrong with the Venom combat suit on his body and glanced back subconsciously. He didn't know when it happened, but a liquid black line separated from the back of the Venom combat suit, and slowly extended towards Carter's body like a tentacle. Carter put her hands on the wooden railing and supported her chin with one palm, completely unaware of Venom's probing intention on her back. Don't make trouble, Venom. Kale's scalp tingled as he looked at it. He knew that Venom didn't have any malicious intentions. It was just a human being who met a female for the first time and was very curious about the body structure of a woman. What's wrong with you? Why is your face so ugly? Carter glanced at Kale in surprise. It's nothing. Don't worry, I will come back safely tomorrow. Kale said, and in the corner of his eyes, Venom's liquid tentacle had approached Carter's back, and it was about to curiously try to cover it. Stop it right now. Kale shouted in his mind, and his right hand quickly stretched out towards Venom's extended tentacle. His two fingers accurately pinched the front end of the black line and merged it back into the transmogrification glove. But then, his palm continued to move forward and gently patted Carter's raised buttocks. Paw! A crisp slap sounded in the night, and the atmosphere between the two suddenly solidified. Carter's beautiful face showed a shocked expression at first, but it quickly turned into a winter indifference, and her beautiful eyes stared fiercely at Kale. This is a misunderstanding, there are mosquitoes. Kale awkwardly retracted his hand, and even he didn't believe what he said. How could there be mosquitoes in the ice and snow of winter? It feels good, right? Carter snorted coldly, turned around and left the corridor downstairs, and said coldly, American hero? Major rank? I see it now, you are nothing more than a lecherous rogue. Forget it, let's sleep. Chapter 44. The night passed. Early the next morning, Kale was woken up by the communication soldier, who conveyed the colonel's order to gather directly at the underground command center of the base. Kale didn't delay. After a simple wash, he let Venom attach to his body and turned it into a black combat uniform. He then rushed to the underground passage with a sodium-carbon steel sword. When he arrived at the brightly lit entrance of the command room, Kale was surprised to find that Steve, wearing the captain's combat uniform, had already arrived. And the gathering mentioned by the colonel was not just the two of them, but also Howard, Carter, Fry, the colonel, and more than a dozen intelligence analysts. The seats at the commander's table were almost full. With such a big lineup, it seems that you have obtained very important information from the professor. Kale said as he stepped into the command room. Hello, Major Kale. Seeing Kale, the intelligence personnel saluted with an expression of admiration. Howard shook his head and laughed. Man, why are you so slow? You're the only one missing in this battle meeting. I thought you, a war maniac, would miss this battle. Frey's tanned face smiled, revealing a row of white teeth. Kale, over here. Steve kept waving his hand to let him sit in the empty seat next to him. Carter still sat in her seat without saying a word, as if she was still angry about what happened last night, but when she saw Kale's arrival, the solemnity on her cold face also relaxed. The colonel in front of the strategic map waved his hand and urged Kale to quickly sit down and said, I was just about to explain the content of the intelligence, so I'm not late. Find a seat and sit down. Kale nodded and simply waved his hand in response to the people he knew, then sat in the empty seat next to Steve. In any case, the arrival of Kale himself eased the atmosphere in the underground command room a lot. Everyone's tense faces also relaxed a lot, and they felt at ease for no reason. This is the unique charm that symbolizes the strength of the UA heroes. It is not just a title that is touted, but it is also created by the number of enemies killed. Then I'll get to the point. The colonel coughed and said solemnly, late last night, the intelligence personnel learned a very urgent intelligence message from the new professor who joined the Hydra organization. The founder of Hydra, Schmidt, Red Skull, his strategic goal is not only to occupy European land, but to destroy half of the Earth and then rule the whole world. Hearing this shocking news, most of the people in the command center frowned. This lunatic should be thrown into a mental hospital. He really thinks he's a god. Carter coldly snorted. Fry murmured thoughtfully, it's crazy, this may be the root of the German army's reluctance to cooperate with Hydra. Howard frowned and said, we can't just leave him be. Schmidt possesses power far beyond our imagination. The energy weapons are the best proof. Kale nodded in agreement. After all, he knew better than anyone what Red Skull had. Magic Cube. The basic usage of the space gem with the law of the universe is enough to create infinite energy, and the explosive power of the gem residual energy cube is simply unmatched by ordinary bombs. The colonel raised his voice and solemnly said, we also have more important information. Schmidt plans to fly to the United States today. As long as he crosses the Atlantic, he will be able to flatten the entire East Coast in less than an hour. With the United States as the starting point, then upgrade to half of the world. How much time is left? Kale asked simply. The colonel quickly replied, less than 12 hours. That's enough. Kale nodded confidently. The colonel shook his head and said, the biggest problem now is that Hydra's last base is different from the factory bases you attacked before. It is located 500 feet below the Alps and is easy to defend. I have an idea. Steve, who had been silent, said, if we send the army directly, Schmidt will definitely close the gate of the base and escape. So we must send someone to lure them to open the gate of the Hydra base alone, and our army will take this opportunity to launch a siege. Then I'll go. Kale shrugged indifferently. He had so many life-saving means that even if he broke into the Hydra base alone, he was confident that he could retreat. No. Steve vetoed and looked at Kale and said, you're good at attacking. It's more appropriate for you to lead the army outside. And your appearance, are you sure you won't scare Schmidt away? The last sentence was obviously a little exaggerated and mocking. But everyone in the command room did not deny it, but nodded deeply. The German executioner, the battlefield meat grinder, the hero symbolizing the strength of the United States, the demon code name full of murderous spirit. The deterrent force of Kyle's appearance on the battlefield was definitely no less than that of a fully armed elite army. Letting such a man lure the enemy's army? What a joke. The colonel also said half jokingly and half seriously, to be honest. If I were Schmidt and saw Major Kale break into the base, I would choose to run away directly. Don't describe me as an inhuman monster. Kale crossed his arms and glanced at them coldly. I came up with the plan, please let me go. Steve stood up and said firmly, as Captain America, I will also attract the Hydra organization to take the initiative to attack as bait. So I am the only suitable candidate. Kale looked at Steve, who had a resolute and righteous face, and an adjective came to his mind for no reason. Captain America, carry the hardest shield and take the most vicious beating. The situation is urgent, and we can't delay it any longer. The plan is so set. In this mission, all base personnel will cooperate with the two of you to attack. The colonel finished and slammed his palm on the table to express his firm determination. Then let's start now. Destroy the last Hydra base and send the madman Schmidt to hell in one fell swoop. 3 hours later, near the Alps. The noon sun was bright and full, and the snow and the mountains and forests reflected the dazzling light. Boom! A burst of noisy engine sound suddenly sounded, and Steve, with a round shield on his back, rode a motorcycle quickly through the snowy forest. His hands clenched the handle and he kept speeding up. The back of the motorcycle sprayed blue flames and exhaust, the wheels crushed the snow and branches, and the full horsepower rushed alone towards the main gate of the Hydra base. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, these sounds came from behind Steve, but there were more than a dozen enemy motorcycles following closely behind like shadows. The fish took the bait. On the snowy mountain next to the forest, Kale looked down coldly at the motorcycle chase in the forest, like a hunter ready to hunt, patiently waiting for the fierce battle to come. Chapter 45. Steve Rogers, Captain America. As a veteran hero of the original Marvel world at this stage, he has the perfect physique of a super soldier, a superior mind for making decisions in battle, a dozen combat skills, and the hard and functional Ardman's shield. To some extent, his strength can be counted on one's fingers throughout World War II, and he is the most heroic soldier. Unfortunately, Kale, who has the ability to draw cards, appeared out of nowhere, causing Steve to be in the awkward position of he shung you. After all, Kale's glory is too dazzling. They are both soldiers and super soldiers, but in terms of personal strength, personal achievements, military rank, and even the influence and deterrence as an American hero, Steve will always be a younger brother compared to him. This makes Steve work harder during the mission. He wants to prove his captain's name and try to walk in front of Kale again and again. Gotcha. Steve looked coldly at the enemy motorcycle that was quickly approaching from behind in the rearview mirror. While constantly fueling and speeding up, he pressed a button on the motorcycle, and suddenly steel rope sprayed out from both sides of the motorcycle. 3 or 4 enemy motorcycles in front immediately suffered, and the people tripped by the steel ropes rolled over and plunged into the snow on the ground. The rest of the enemy motorcycles dodged the ropes and continued to pursue. Soon, they were directly faced with the flames spurting out from the rear of Steve's motorcycle. They howled and fell in a small area in the sea of fire, followed by continuous explosions. Easily getting rid of the entanglement of the enemy motorcycles, Steve raised his head and looked at the main gate of the Hydra base that appeared in front of him, and a large number of guards with energy weapons poured out to meet the enemy, and he put the shield behind him in front of the motorcycle as protection. Under the bombardment of the energy tank, coupled with the intensive lasers emitted by the energy guns, Steve drove the motorcycle at full speed and rushed into the main gate of the base. This motorcycle had been modified by Howard. Naturally, it was equipped with a lot of advanced technology. Not only was there an ejector cable, there was fire at the back of the motorcycle, and there was also a self-destruct device. As soon as Steve drove into the Hydra base, he jumped off the motorcycle. The motorcycle continued forward and hit the main gate of the base. The powerful explosion instantly blew a gap in the half-opened steel gate of the base, and a dozen guards around the gate were blown to pieces. Again. Steve raised his shield and shouted. Alone, he fiercely and valiantly charged into the group of enemies, fighting with dozens of guards as if he was fighting an entire army by himself. At the same time, on the side of the main gate of the Hydra base, less than 100 meters away, thousands of U.S. soldiers were quietly lurking, waiting for the right time to plan. At the front of the army, Kale and Fry were squatting on the edge of the snow, watching Steve, who was fighting a bloody battle through binoculars. Fry exclaimed, "Steve, although he's just acting as bait, he's really getting more and more like your fighting style." "No." Kale shook his head gently and said slowly, "This should be his real style. Because what he symbolizes is only the justice and protection of the United States. Steve's offensive ability is not strong in other people's perception. In fact, always rushing to the front of the war as a lonely vanguard, defending everything with the shield, and facing the enemy with the shield, this is the real posture of Captain America." Next. Under the original plan, Steve was defeated under the siege of a steady stream of armed guards and was detained by the guards and brought into the base. Seeing that the gate of the base was fully open again, Kale nodded and ordered, "Second Lieutenant Fry, you lead the army, directly attack the main gate of the base, annihilate and destroy all the equipment inside. And quickly surround this place, don't let go of even a single person from the Hydra organization. Understood. Fry nodded and looked at Kale thoughtfully and said, "You're going to attack directly with the steel cable pulley?" "Of course. Slow down, the Red Skull will run away, I have to enter the base as soon as possible and intercept him." Kale said, his blue eyes condensed a cold light, and his body produced a faint murderous aura. "It's time to settle the old score." At this time, inside the Hydra's last underground base, in the hall on the second floor, Steve was detained by 2 armed guards and taken directly to the hall, stopping in front of a scarlet man with an ugly skull face. The man was the founder of the Hydra organization, Schmidt, also known as the Red Skull. He looked indifferently at Steve in front of him and said in a contemptuous tone, "You really inherited the arrogance of the United States, and you're even better than that. You came here alone to die. But Professor Erskine ran away from me and left everything to you and Kyle," Roland said. At this point, the Red Skull gritted his teeth, and his angry and distorted expression made his face even uglier. He was also a super soldier, but he was not as good as the other 2, and he was disfigured to this extent. "The professor told me that you are a lunatic and don't deserve what he has." Steve smiled sarcastically. "Shut up. He's just jealous of my talent. What's so special about you?" The Red Skull growled, clenched his fists, and punched Steve in the stomach. Cough. Steve coughed a few times in pain and was hit directly on the floor of the hall. The Red Skull looked down at him and pulled out a modified energy pistol from his waist. "Captain, let me end your life." In the face of life and death, Steve laughed and said, "Didn't you ask what's so special about me? Sorry, I'm just a short boy from Brooklyn, New York, but I have a brother." As soon as he finished speaking, from outside the window on the second floor of the base, a black figure suddenly broke the glass window and rushed into the base through the suspended steel cable. The 2 guards at the window were paying attention to the intruder. The young man in a black combat suit rolled on the ground, completely dissipating the impact. As he got up quickly, he pulled out a sharp one-handed sword with his left hand and quickly slashed at the guards. Puff! The 2 fully armed guards' heads flew high into the air like watermelons. All of this happened too quickly. The young man in the black battle suit only took half a second from the moment he broke in to the moment he flew up and killed the 2 guards. When everyone on the second floor of the base looked over, they could only see the emotionless young man standing in the hall with a sword in his hand, looking coldly at them. Behind him were 4 decapitated bodies. "Kale, it's Kale from the U.S. Army." No one knew who shouted first in the hall on the second floor of the base, and then a suffocating sense of panic wrapped around most people's hearts. The members of the Hydra organization have been brainwashed and are absolutely loyal, but this does not mean that they have lost the thing called fear. Chapter 46. Kale is here. This sentence is often quoted by German citizens to intimidate children. At this time, in the hall on the second floor of the base, Hydra's armed guards looked at Kale who broke in from the window and their scalps tingled and they took a breath of cold air. They are not afraid of dying in battle, but they are afraid of being beheaded like pigs and cabbages. If the enemy is only Steve, the guards are still confident that they can subdue him by relying on the number of people, but with the addition of Demon Kale, it is quite different. In the hall of the base, Red Skull, who knows Kale's personal strength better, naturally understands this, so the moment he saw Kale's figure appear, he turned around without hesitation and decisively rushed to the underground passage of the base. "Want to run again?" Kale entered the hall and his eyes fell on Steve first. After confirming his safety, he locked onto Red Skull's location. At this time, seeing that Red Skull wanted to run, Kale snorted coldly and rushed straight to him with his sword in hand. At this time, Steve no longer pretended to attack violently. He got up and stunned the 2 guards who detained him behind him. He held the shield in his right hand and looked at Red Skull coldly. Red Skull apparently noticed the chill coming from the back of his neck. While desperately accelerating his escape, he shouted ferociously, "Everyone, stop them for me!" Yes. The armed guards in the base responded in unison, frantically building a defensive line with their bodies and shooting. "Stop me?" Kale sneered at the corner of his mouth, and the sword in his hand fell. The two guards in front of him, holding the energy guns in their arms, were cut off and scarlet blood splashed on the smooth floor. But Kale was trying to continue to chase without slowing down, and the rest of the armed guards rushed forward again, forcing him to be distracted to solve the human obstacles on the road. It should be said that they are worthy of being completely brainwashed Hydra personnel. Knowing that there is a dead end, the armed guards still hold on as cannon fodder and shoot to intercept Kale and Steve's pursuit of Red Skull. Kyle quickly raised his right hand and blocked another laser beam. The sodium-carbon steel sword in his left hand was stained with blood from the blade to the hilt. Blood kept dripping down. He looked indifferently at the corner at the end of the hall on the second floor. Red Skull's back had gone far away and was about to completely disappear at the corner of the hall on the second floor. "Don't even think about running." Kale gritted his teeth. Stepping on the chest of the guard before him, he leapt up. While in the air, he threw out his left hand. Whoosh! The sodium-carbon steel sword was like a hidden weapon, quickly tearing through the air and rushing towards Red Skull's back with a sharp and harsh sound. "Get over here." Seeing that it was about to be hit by the sodium-carbon steel sword, Red Skull seemed to feel something and grabbed the guard who passed by and used it as a shield to block behind him. Poochie, the guard's body was as fragile as a piece of paper. The protective suit and the chest under it were easily penetrated by the tip of the sword and protruded out of the back, splashing Red Skull with warm blood. "Humph, Major Kale, I'll remember." Red Skull indifferently threw the guard's body on the ground and was about to throw down a sarcastic remark, but he noticed the strangeness in his arm and quickly cast his gaze. He saw that the sword just now had penetrated the guard's body and the tip of the sword had cut a slender wound on his left arm, which was overflowing with blood. "It's obviously just a flesh wound. With my extraordinary physique, how could this happen?" Red Skull said to himself incredulously. His eyes glanced at the one-handed sword on the guard's body in surprise, the other hand covered the wound, and he did not dare to stay any longer and disappeared from the corner passage. Almost, is he going to run away again? Kale raised his eyebrows. At this moment, the deafening sound of soldiers charging came from outside the base. It was from the thousands of U.S. soldiers led by Fry that launched a vast encirclement and suppression of the Hydra base. Clang! Outside the glass window on the second floor of the base, several agile U.S. soldiers with steel cables broke in and fought with the armed guards in the hall, greatly alleviating the obstruction pressure on Kale. "Well done. Steve, you and the soldiers clean up the Hydra guards here, I'll go after Red Skull." As soon as Kale finished speaking, he quickly skimmed over the fierce battle in the hall, pulled his sword out of the corpse at the corner, and accelerated to the underground passage. "Kale!" Steve shouted and slammed the guard around him with his shield and resolutely followed Kale's back. Under the dark passage of the base. Red Skull was in front, Kale was in the middle, and Steve was behind. The three of them could not see each other, but they all tacitly agreed to speed up the chase. "With the bonus of the Venom suit, not only my strength, but even my speed is faster than the perfect super soldier," Kale thought to himself, confident enough to catch up with the injured Red Skull. And he has another means of acceleration. Following the tiny bloodstains on the ground, Kale seemed to turn into a black mist in the dimly lit tunnel, and his speed soared to another level. Sneak, ability card, in the Nightwalker mode, additional movement speed is increased. "I'll see how you run this time." Kale, like a bloodthirsty cheetah, chased forward at full speed with a whistling wind. In a short while, in front of the slightly curved tunnel, Red Skull's back was reflected in his indifferent red eyes, and the distance between the two was less than 10 meters. Within 10 meters of others, coupled with the limited conditions under the light, Kale's sneak mode was also forced to be lifted, and his figure was completely exposed in the tunnel. How can he be so fast? At the same time, Red Skull also found Kale chasing behind him, and for the first time in his life, he felt his scalp tingle. They are both super soldiers, how can the gap be so big, why? Red Skull's face was distorted with grief and indignation, and he could only continue to escape in the position of prey, but the distance between him and Kale was constantly decreasing. Schmidt, why don't we stop, have a drink and talk about life? Kale teased, destroying Red Skull's psychological defense little by little. Red Skull was silent, and he wished his parents didn't give him an extra leg, and he tried his best to escape. If you don't stop, then I will take the initiative to come over. Kale said, and regardless of the physical consumption, he accelerated again and rushed behind Red Skull with his sword. In the last 5 meters, an armed guard suddenly inserted from the intersection on the side of the tunnel, blocking behind Red Skull, and the weapon in his hand was aimed at the approaching Kale. Unlike other energy weapon muzzles that glowed with blue light, it was a huge gun nozzle connected to the gasoline tank behind the guard. Flamethrower? Kale just identified the weapon of the guard in front of him, and the one-handed sword was immediately inserted into the tunnel wall to stabilize his body, and he rolled back again. Chapter 47. In the narrow underground tunnel, the flamethrower was undoubtedly more lethal than energy weapons. The continuous eruption of a large area of flame made the air extremely hot. Kale frowned and retreated to a safe distance, using the concave wall of the tunnel as a cover to block the flames. If it was an energy weapon, he could use the vibranium arm guard to block the laser directly, but the large area of fire of the flamethrower just limited the defensive performance of the arm guard. What was even more deadly was the venom on Kale's body that turned into a battle suit. Venom, who was not afraid of bullets and lasers, bullets were enough for defense, and lasers could heal in liquid form, conveyed an instinctive fear to the host Kale under the threat of the high-temperature flames. Okay, bear with it for a little longer. Kale comforted Venom verbally and wanted to throw the sword in his hand to shoot the guard. The moment he raised his hand, a disc-shaped object whizzed past him from behind. The disc-shaped shield accurately hit the head of the guard holding the flamethrower, directly knocking him out, and then quickly flew back in an arc. Adman's shield? Kyle quickly looked back and saw a tall young man rushing forward and catching the disc-shaped shield. It was none other than Steve himself, who had hurriedly chased after them. Steve, aren't you going to block and clean up the guards? Kale asked in surprise. Steve replied firmly, there are naturally soldiers to clean up the guards. How can you only deal with Schmidt alone? Up to you, then this time let's compete to see who can take down the leader of Hydra first. Before Kyle could finish his words, he had already dashed towards the end of the tunnel. No problem. Wow, you can't go back on your word. Steve shouted and kept up with Kale's pace without slowing down. The two quickly passed through the last section of the underground tunnel, one in front and one behind. Coming out of the tunnel, what appeared in front of them was a spacious underground base square with hundreds of armed guards holding energy weapons. How troublesome. Kale raised his sword coldly. Steve also raised his shield resolutely. The two people fighting side by side were not afraid of the 100 guards, but if they were delayed for too long, the Hydra leader Red Skull would escape. Bang! 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 At this moment, a large number of U.S. soldiers with rifles poured in from the underground tunnels in different directions of the underground square. They quickly fired at the armed guards when they saw them. One of the troops was led by Fry, who was wearing a left eye patch. He rushed to the front of the troops and waved at Kale with a smile. Kale, do you need reinforcements? Kale breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. You came at the right time. You're really reliable. As if hearing his words, the woman who had just come out of the tunnel with her army snorted coldly. Who isn't? Steve looked at the cold woman and said jokingly, Carter, you were almost late. I am already late. Kale corrected him. This made Carter's beautiful eyes glare again. Ha ha ha, I'm the only one left, right? Only half a beat slower than the others, a playful and familiar voice sounded from behind. As the car lights continued to light up, a very crafty car drove over and stopped in front of Cale and the others. Howard, who was in the driver's seat, waved at them in his usual gentlemanly manner. "Why are you, the logistics department of the science and strategy department, here? You even drove Schmidt's car into the base." Cale raised his eyebrows in surprise. Howard smiled and said, "This is the final battle of the European War. Of course, I have to come. After all, we are a team." "Us? A team?" Cale was suddenly stunned. He looked around at Fry, Carter, and Steve, and finally the corner of his mouth could not help but curl into a subtle smile. That's right. Unbeknownst to them, they had already become a team, an invincible elite team. Now is not the time to chat, Schmidt is going to escape in the plane. Steve suddenly reminded, pointing to the end of the underground square. There, a large transport aircraft was slowly starting up, speeding up to the exit outside the base. It was obvious that Red Skull was on it. Howard quickly said, "Get in, I'll take you two there." Cale and Steve did not hesitate and directly jumped into the car, one on the left and one on the right. Howard stepped on the accelerator, and the engine roared as the car sped up to chase after the large aircraft. "You must win." Carter clenched her fists with some worry and watched the back of the two until the car disappeared at the end of the underground square. On the plane passage in the underground square of the base. The gliders on both sides were 30 meters long, and the wide and long transport aircraft was gliding faster and faster. Not far behind it, a car with 3 people in it was chasing at full speed. "The plane is about to take off, we can't catch up with it at this speed." Steve frowned as he looked at the aircraft in front, his face anxious. Cale was not worried at all. He glanced at Howard, who was still very calm in the driver's seat, and urged, "Don't hide it. If you have any secret black technology device, hurry up and use it. You've seen through it again. Unfortunately, I've refurbished this car once." Howard smiled and pressed a button under the steering wheel. The exhaust pipe at the back of the car immediately erupted with blue flames and powerful jets. The car, which was already over 100 kilometers per hour, suddenly increased its speed by more than 3 times. The strong wind pressure made Cale and Steve hold on to the car seat tightly. The car and the transport aircraft were getting closer and closer. When they were about 10 meters away, the area in front of them suddenly lit up, and the wheels of the transport aircraft began to lift off the ground. "The plane is about to take off. Steve, send me up first," Cale said and stood up from the speeding car. Steve seemed to know what he was thinking. He squatted down slightly in the car seat and raised his shield at an angle. "Let's go." Cale took a deep breath, stepped on the round shield, and jumped forward with all his strength. Steve also pushed the shield forward to increase the speed of his jump. Whoosh! Cale jumped high and quickly crossed 10 meters in the air. When he was still a little distance away from the fuselage of the transport aircraft, the long sword in his left hand suddenly stabbed into the wheel frame of the transport aircraft to stabilize it. "Cale!" Steve shouted and then jumped over. Cale reached out his right hand and grabbed his arm in time, pulling him together as the transport aircraft took off. On the airstrip of the base, Howard braked the speeding car in front of the cliff. He looked at the transport aircraft flying into the sky and the 2 people standing under the wheels and said softly, "I hope you'll succeed in this battle. When you come back, we'll drink to our heart's content again." Chapter 48. In the sky above the Alps, the huge transport jet buzzed as it ascended. Soon, it broke through the clouds and reached a height of 1,000 meters. It headed towards New York City and began to cross the Atlantic Ocean. At the same time, at the rear wheel of the transport jet, Cale grabbed the sodium-carbon steel sword that was nailed to the wheel frame with one hand and grabbed Steve tightly with the other. The two of them were connected together and hung under the transport jet. "Kale, are you okay?" Steve shouted. Under the huge wind pressure in the sky, it was difficult to hear each other's voices. "I'm fine, but you should lose some weight," Kyle complained as he threw Steve onto the top of the car frame with one hand. He waited until Steve had a firm grip on the frame before he put his foot on the wheel. Below their feet was the sky that was still rising. It was a frightening sight. "I know the basic structure of this transport jet. Follow me." Steve waved his hand and took the lead to climb up. Kale used the sodium-carbon steel sword to keep stabbing into the wall of the frame as a support point to ensure safety. He followed behind and climbed up. As super soldiers, the two of them were extraordinarily agile. They continued to climb up the transport jet's wheel without any danger. Soon, they climbed to the bottom of the rear cabin and opened the safety door from the bottom. They completely entered the interior of the transport jet. The rear cabin of the transport jet was spacious. At first glance, it was full of high-tech equipment. The dim light maintained sufficient visibility. "Kale, look," Steve seemed to have noticed something. His determined face became serious as he lowered his voice and gestured to a spot in the rear cabin of the transport jet. Kale followed his gaze and saw two strange-looking single-person planes parked in the rear cabin of the transport jet. They were smaller than a normal single-person plane. They had an oblate shape and were painted with dark green paint. The strange thing was that they were not equipped with any obvious ammunition muzzles. Only the lower half of the plane was 3 times larger than the upper half. There was no need to guess anything. As an item card, the identification information quickly appeared. Nuclear bomb plane, a single-person aircraft carrying a nuclear bomb. The power of the nuclear bomb can easily destroy a large city. Blue rare item card. Current status, unable to draw. It is a one-time use item. Kale was shocked. He finally knew why Red Skull was so confident that he could level the entire west coast of the United States. These were 2 nuclear warplanes. Even a superpower with the strongest military power would not be able to withstand the invasion of its territory. "Steve, find the rear cabin of the transport fighter and release these 2 aircraft directly into the sea," Kale said decisively. At this time, the transport fighter should have already reached the airspace of the Atlantic Ocean. If Red Skull were to successfully transport the nuclear plane to New York, the consequences would be unimaginable. Steve also understood this and nodded in agreement. At this time, a team of armed guards from the Hydra organization trotted to the rear cabin of the fighter. "Have we been discovered?" Kale raised his eyes coldly and greeted them with a sodium-carbon steel sword in his hand, not forgetting to urge them, "Hurry up, I'll stop them." "Enemy attack. Shoot directly." The team of armed guards saw Kale rushing over quickly and quickly fired with energy weapons. In an instant, the rear cabin of the transport fighter was illuminated by a dazzling blue laser. "These idiots dash," Kale frowned. He was not afraid of the laser shooting, but that the laser shooting would become a fuse and accidentally trigger the explosion of the nuclear plane behind him. "I don't want to be buried with you cannon fodder. Die." Kyle's handsome face turned even colder. He gathered his strength and threw the sodium-carbon steel sword out, directly piercing through the guard captain who shot the most fiercely. The guard captain was firmly nailed to the metal wall of the rear cabin. In the face of a potential huge crisis, Kale did not choose to dodge. Instead, he raised his right hand wearing a vibranium arm guard and constantly blocked the energy laser shooting at him to avoid affecting the nuclear plane behind him. "Kale, catch it." As if knowing Kale's situation, Steve shouted and threw the Adaman shield in his hand over. Kale leaped up and caught the round shield. He used his left hand to block the shield in front of him, blocking the intensive laser beams while sprinting in front of a guard. The guard raised his energy laser gun in horror, but the next moment, Kyle's right palm blocked the gun's muzzle. The shot of the laser beam hit the vibranium arm guard and bounced back, disintegrating and evaporating the energy laser gun and his arm on the spot. "All right." Steve's voice just sounded. As he manipulated the equipment button, the cabin of a nuclear plane was opened first and released into the ocean a kilometer below the transport fighter. The opening of the cabin also caused the air inside the rear cabin to surge out and flow backward, sucking many guards into the cabin. Kale smiled like a demon and looked indifferently at the guard who was kneeling on the ground and wailing with a broken arm. He picked him up with one hand like a chicken and threw him out of the open cabin behind him. Next, the guards who still wanted to resist were also thrown down one by Kale and Steve as goods from a height of thousands of meters. "Kale!" Steve suddenly shouted, but at some point, a guard approached the second nuclear plane that was being released, opened the cover and sat in the pilot seat. Before either of them could stop it, the second nuclear plane was released. "Don't let him leave," Steve said and wanted to rush out of the cabin, but at the last moment, he was intercepted by Kale and pulled back, watching the guard drive the nuclear plane away. "Don't worry, he doesn't need us to deal with him," Kale said confidently as he calmly looked at the vast blue sky outside the cabin. As if to prove his words, beyond the rear cabin's visible high altitude, a huge blue eagle tore through the clouds at extreme speed, dragging a series of air waves as it quickly chased after the nuclear plane that was gradually disappearing. "So you called the Blue Eagle over?" Steve looked at the Blue Eagle's figure in the distance and felt relieved. "It's the final battle of the European theater, we can't be careless." Kale shrugged and threw the shield back to Steve. He pulled back the one-handed sword from the metal wall and wiped the blood on the body of the guard's corpse. Chapter 49. The transport fighter slowly drove above the clouds, basking in the golden sunlight as it flew towards the end of the Atlantic Ocean. Kale and Steve, one holding a sword and the other holding a shield, cautiously entered the pilot's hall of the fighter. Red Skull obviously fled in a hurry and did not bring many armed guards with the fighter. Just now, all the guards were thrown out of the cabin by the two of them, so at this time, the spacious pilot's hall of the fighter was silent. On the pilot's instrument of the transport fighter, there was no one to be seen, and it was automatically flying according to the flight route set by the system. Directly behind the pilot's seat was a storage device glowing with a mysterious blue light. Through the glass storage device, the cube object inside could be vaguely seen. Kale immediately stared at the item placed in the storage device. His blue eyes reflected the blue light on the surface. Even if the distance was not enough for the card information to appear, he could be sure that there was no possibility of mistaken identity. The Tesseract, there can be no mistake. After all, even though they were 10 meters away, plus the metal and glass storage frame, they could still clearly feel the heart-palpitating and intoxicating mysterious charm. Steve also wanted to slowly step into the hall with his shield, but Kale shook his head. With such a big movement in the rear cabin, Red Skull obviously knew that they had caught up with the fighter, so there was no need for a sneak attack. The fact that the enemy was in the dark and they were in the light was unfavorable, but the enemy was weak and they were strong. This was also a huge gap that the injured Red Skull could not reverse. Kale stepped forward with his sword and said coldly, "Schmidt, you're the only one left. You call yourself Hydra, so don't hide like a mouse. What other means do you have? Hurry up and use them." Seeing this, Steve spread his hands and stepped forward. He said in a warning tone, "It's time to put an end to all your evil deeds, Schmidt." In the face of the two people's sneers and questions, Red Skull's cold response suddenly came from the pilot seat of the fighter's main hull. "You two are really endless. Do you really think you can win against me? Do you think that by wearing clothes with the United States logo, you prove that you are a national symbol? I have already seen the future. It is a beautiful world with no division of countries, one that is purely under my rule." After confirming Red Skull's location, Kale and Steve looked at each other and flanked him tacitly. Red Skull in the driver's seat was still talking to himself. Until the last moment, it's hard to say who will win or lose. As soon as he finished speaking, he slammed his palm on the steering wheel and pushed it to the ground. Buzz! The transport fighter, which had been cruising smoothly, suddenly came to a stop. Then, its head crashed into the clouds directly below, and it dived at a 90-degree angle. All the objects in the main hull of the fighter, including Kale and Steve, were also floating and tumbling in various angles in the main hull of the fighter. This is just the beginning. Red Skull, who was wearing a seat belt in the driver's seat, snorted coldly. He raised a large laser weapon, but the muzzle was not aimed at Kale or Steve who were rolling behind him, but at the driver's window in front of him. All of you go to hell. His scarlet skull face was slightly distorted, his sunken eye sockets flashed with madness, and he shot the pilot's window with the laser weapon. Bang! The moment the window was destroyed by the laser, under the strong pressure difference between the inside and outside of the fighter, a strong hurricane was generated and sucked everything in the main hull toward the broken window and into the high sky outside the fighter. This was an altitude of 10,000 meters above the ground. If it was an ordinary person, they would have fainted under the strong pressure difference. Kale, be careful. Steve was lucky enough to grab the iron frame on the top of the main hull of the fighter, and his worried eyes turned to Kale who was still floating in the air. That guy really doesn't want to live anymore. Kale gritted his teeth. When he was pulled toward the window, he quickly nailed the sword in his hand to the floor of the cabin. Fortunately, Kale breathed a sigh of relief after the sword was nailed to the floor, but when he looked down, his pupils suddenly shrank. Coincidentally, the sodium-carbon steel sword was nailed to the glass container that was glowing with blue light. The glass cracked and gradually revealed the mysterious aura of the Rubik's Cube inside. Oh my God, Kale's scalp went numb. The consequences of Red Skull's direct contact with the Rubik's Cube in the movies flashed through his mind. He was forcibly exiled to the outer reaches of the universe, and guarded the soul gem alone on a desolate planet for more than 70 years. At this moment, the Rubik's Cube was completely exposed to the air, and was less than half a meter away from him. As if stimulated by the sword, the mysterious blue light on the surface of the Rubik's Cube became brighter and brighter, and then rays of light rushed out, revealing a bright universe star map in the void. Space was twisting inch by inch, and the Rubik's Cube was attracting Kale who was nearby. This is the end. Kale was in a dilemma, and could only look at the Rubik's Cube in front of him as it slowly opened a space tunnel. Was he going to be teleported away? Kale smiled bitterly and was about to close his eyes in resignation when Steve's voice suddenly rang in his ears. Kale! Get out of the way! The next moment, a round shield quickly swept across a distance of more than 10 meters and suddenly hit the Rubik's Cube that reflected the star map, knocking it away from Kale and toward the opening in the window. That was close. Kale's face was pale. He was so close to being teleported to some godforsaken place by the Rubik's Cube. I love Earth. Escaping from danger, Kale was overjoyed. He couldn't wait to give Steve a bear hug. No! Red Skull shouted. He looked at the Rubik's Cube that swept past him and was about to be thrown out of the window. He was stunned and hurriedly reached out to grab the Rubik's Cube. The star map that was about to dim continued to shine, and a rainbow beam of light blasted Red Skull from the sky, drowning him and evaporating his body. The Rubik's Cube completed this simple space manipulation and continued to throw the fighter into the sea. The fighter continued its 90-degree suicidal dive. When it was less than a kilometer from the ground, Kale moved under the strong wind pressure and reached the pilot's seat with difficulty and put the steering wheel back in place. As soon as he did this, the transport fighter immediately returned to normal, but the control instrument seemed to be on the verge of being damaged and was emitting smoke. Phew! Kale sat down on the floor tiredly. Although there was still strong wind pressure, the fighter was finally moving smoothly. Plus, the fighter wasn't at a high altitude, so the suction force was greatly reduced to an acceptable range. Are you okay? Steve smiled and came down from the top of the hull. He came to the pilot's seat and fastened his seatbelt. Kale waved his hand and said, "I'm fine. Hurry up and contact the base and let them arrange for this fighter to land." "Okay." Steve nodded and sat in the pilot's seat and began to operate the instrument. After a while, he seemed to have discovered something and his relaxed face gradually turned serious. "What's wrong?" Kale noticed the change in Steve's expression and couldn't help but stand up and ask. Steve took a deep breath and said coldly, "The situation isn't good. The autopilot can't be deactivated and a lot of the human pilot's functions have been damaged. This fighter is still moving towards the original New York location." "What?" When Kale heard this, he also realized the huge potential danger. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry, let me think of a way." "There's no time." Steve shook his head and quietly clenched his fists, as if he had made a difficult decision in life. He smiled and said, "Kale, quickly go to the back cabin and prepare a parachute." "What do you mean?" Kale was slightly stunned. Steve said firmly, "I'm going to sink this plane into the sea. Quickly prepare a parachute and jump. Don't worry, there must be another solution. Besides, even if I have to stay on the plane in the end, I—" Before Kale could finish his words, he was quickly interrupted by Steve. "Well, let me do this." Steve grabbed the pilot's instrument with both hands. His young and handsome face was full of determination. He smiled and said, "Kale, you don't know. I've been chasing after you. From the training base to the later competitions and battlefields, I can only watch your back. While constantly chasing after you, I also have to constantly accept the opportunities you give me. Since I've declared myself as Captain America, then let me surpass you this time and walk in front of you to open the way." At this point, Steve seemed to have returned to the young man who was physically weak but had an unyielding will. "I know." After Kale finished speaking, he walked silently to the back cabin of the fighter. He knew that no matter how much he said, he couldn't change his comrade's decision. Because the other person was not only the best comrade, but also his brother. He was also the Captain America of this world. Even if he encountered thousands of dangerous situations, he would still rush to the forefront with a determined face. He would rather sacrifice himself to protect everything he wanted to protect. "By the way, please take care of Carter." Steve didn't forget to remind him. "Bastard, who's going to take care of your girlfriend? I'll wait for you at the base." Kale turned around and scolded. I do like Carter, but she's not my girlfriend." Steve shook his head and summoned up the courage to say, "Carter, the person she likes has always been you. Don't make such a joke. How could she like me? You're not mistaken, are you?" Kale was a little confused. What was going on? He had just unintentionally flirted with her a few times. Then just take it as a joke. Steve shrugged and said, "Next Friday night at 8:00, I have an appointment with her to go to the bird club. If I don't arrive by then, you go for me. Don't worry. I'll book the whole place for you and wait for you to come back and ask her to dance." Kale waved his hand and left the main hall of the cabin. Steve's voice was still faintly heard behind him. "Big brother, I'll leave everything to you." 15 seconds later, a figure jumped down from the back cabin of the fighter. After reaching 100 meters in the air, he opened his parachute and slowly floated down towards the blue sea. Kale, who was under the parachute, looked up at the end of the sky. There was a plane flying away and soon disappeared into the clouds. Steve, no matter what the result is, no matter how long it takes. Chapter 50. In early 1944. The Hydra organization that wreaked havoc in Europe was completely annihilated. The founder of the organization, Schmidt, was sanctioned by Kale and Steve and was judged to have died on the spot. When this important news of the battle was sent back to the US, it instantly led to a grand celebration across the country. Countless soldiers who had returned to the base from the hospital or from the battlefield gathered together to raise their glasses and drink in high spirits. Cheers to victory! Cheers to Major Kale and Captain Steve! Cheers to the heroes! I hope the world will usher in peace as soon as possible. In countless bars in big cities, such cheers resounded throughout the night. In the same month, the German army, which lost its manufacturing factories, was greatly weakened and withdrew from the front line on a large scale. This also became a major omen of Germany's declaration of surrender soon. However, in the festive atmosphere of the great victory of the Western European War, the two heroes, Kale and Steve, as the protagonists, were like fireworks following the end of the artillery fire of the battle, never to return. Although in the end, Lieutenant Steve got in touch with the U.S. military base through the communicator from the enemy's out-of-control fighter, the signal was quickly cut off. He only left an intermittent message: sink the out-of-control fighter into the Atlantic Ocean. Do not let it enter New York. As for Major Kyle, it was as if he had followed the fighter jet that had gone out of control, completely disappearing without a trace. Half a month later. Somewhere on the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, the warm morning sun shone down, painting the blue waves and waves with a layer of shiny golden edges. A modern white two-story sailboat sailed slowly on the sea, like a small leaf drifting with the waves and sea breeze. On the open floor of the white sailboat, a blond young man wearing sunglasses lazily reclined on a sun chair with his hands behind his head, looking particularly casual and comfortable. He only wore a pair of beach pants, and his upper body was bare with perfect abs forged by steel craftsmanship, allowing the sun to bathe his strong and perfect body. Next to the sun chair, on a round table with a small sunshade, a creature with a black liquid shape was moving around, as if it was disgusted by the hot weather. I haven't relaxed like this in a long time. Kale, who was lying on the sun chair, couldn't help but sigh. Ever since he was reborn into the world of Marvel during World War II, he had been in constant war for several months. Even if he had the extraordinary physique of a super soldier, his body had to be in a state of high alert at all times. Perhaps an energy laser, a high-explosive grenade, a sniper rifle, or even an indiscriminate carpet bombing from a bomber could send him straight to the sky. Even if Kale was in a deep sleep after a long period of war, if someone suddenly approached his bed, even if he wasn't awake, his body would instinctively react and subdue the enemy. Fry, Steve, and even Carter had all suffered such losses. Think about it this way. Isn't it better to just follow Brandt's suggestion and return to New York to be a normal citizen? This thought quickly flashed through his mind, and Kale did not continue to think about it. With the ability to draw cards, if he really cowered in a seemingly safe city like that, even he would look down on himself. Instead of worrying about the potential crisis in the future, it was better to take the initiative to walk on the dangerous path where opportunities coexisted with danger. He would continue to strengthen himself, improve his status and reputation until he was fearless in the face of any enemy. Without joining the frontline war, where would he get so many free materials to draw? Without fighting side by side with Steve, where would he get the super soldier ability? This was Kale's true belief. Rather than a hero fighting for the UA, it was better to say that he was a warrior fighting for his own future. In addition, in the process, he gained the sincere friendship of Steve, Joseph, Fry, Howard, and Carter, which made him feel very gratified. Kale's thoughts were running wild when suddenly, a loud eagle cry came from the sky, and then the shadow cast by its huge wings completely covered the sailboat. It's back. Kale sat up from the sun chair and looked at the blue eagle that flew close to the sea. Its flapping wings stirred up the waves, throwing up waves. Kale asked the blue eagle, "How is it? Have you found any traces?" Chirp. The blue eagle cried softly and shook its head like a human. Kale frowned and waved to the side. Continue to search in this direction within 20 miles of the sea. The blue eagle's sharp beak tapped lightly, flapped its wings, and soared into the sky. Soon, it disappeared into the clouds. After Steve flew away with the out-of-control fighter, Kale later asked the Blue Eagle, which had returned from the nuclear explosion, to search for traces of the fighter. Unfortunately, there were no clues after half a month. The Atlantic Ocean was vast and boundless. According to the original movie, it was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack if it was frozen and sunk to the bottom. Looks like I have to give up. Kale sighed and was about to consider the trip back to the military base. At this moment, a shallow black shadow emerged from the bottom of the sea beside the sailboat. Splash! A great white shark suddenly jumped out of the sea and stuck out half of its body. It swam in the sea beside the sailboat, nodding and blowing bubbles at Kyle as if it was asking for praise. Kale's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the great white shark nearby and asked to confirm, "Did you really find that thing?" The great white shark continued to jump out of the sea and splash the water to show its attitude. "Venom, go with Xiaofan and fish that thing up." Kale thought for a moment and turned his eyes to Venom, who was lazily lying on the table. Gurgle. Venom was a little disinterested as it turned into countless black silks and jumped off the table. It really had no interest in such a weak and low IQ animal like sharks, but since it was Kare's order, it could only obey. The black liquid threads wrapped around the great white shark in the sea and quickly covered its entire body. It was as if there was a layer of hard, dark keratin membrane. Even the great white shark's eyes turned red, and the teeth in its mouth became even more ferocious and terrifying. Venom was attached to the great white shark, so naturally, it was the main body of the shark. "Go and come back quickly. By the way, don't touch that thing directly with your body." Kale thought for a moment and put 2 wooden boards directly on the teeth of the venom shark. "Clamp it and bring it up." The venom shark swung its tail and quickly dived into the sea. After a while, its figure emerged on the surface of the sea again. At the same time, the brilliant blue light also lit up the sea. The venom shark's head poked out of the sea, and Kyle's eyes immediately fell on its mouth. There was a square block of blue light sandwiched between 2 wooden boards, and it contained a mysterious and profound aura. Chapter 51. Rubik's Cube, that is, the shape of a square cube. Observing from a close distance, the appearance of the Rubik's Cube was constantly overflowing with a mysterious aura, as if it contained a small universe. Kale suppressed his inner excitement and materialized the vibranium arm guard item card and wore it on his bare right hand. Only then did he reach out to grab the Rubik's Cube that was clamped on the wooden board in the venom shark's mouth. It wasn't until the vibranium arm guard's hand held the Rubik's Cube that 2 glowing card information jumped out in Kale's field of vision. The colors of the 2 cards were not white, green, blue, or purple, but they were almost colorless with a pure crystal-like color. Rubik's Cube, a container containing one of the Infinity Stones, the Space Rough Stone, also known as the Infinity Cube. Colorless item card. With the power of space, it can open the door of space and teleport people and items to any place in the universe. Current status: cannot be extracted, connected with the space gem, difficult to use. The second colorless card was almost attached to the previous colorless card, like an overlapping shadow. Space Gem, one of the 6 Infinity Stones in the universe, the gem that controls space. Colorless item card. It was almost the first thing that existed in the universe, and it was also almost the most powerful object in the universe. Using this gem, you can move yourself or all objects to any space in the universe in an instant. You can also distort or reorder space according to your own will, and you can easily achieve space transmission, space freezing, and space backtracking. Current status: can be extracted, difficult to master and use. 2. Colorless item cards. Kale was a little confused for a moment. He thought it was just a Rubik's Cube item card, but the card drawing ability distinguished the gem from the Rubik's Cube container. The container can't be extracted, but the space gem can be extracted. Should I draw? Kale thought carefully, weighed the pros and cons, and soon came to a decision. Draw it would be a waste not to draw. Even if this divine item was placed, it would be idle on Earth for more than half a century until Thor's younger brother, Loki, came in the 21st century, and gradually unearthed the mystery of space transmission. Although it was the time for Thanos to start collecting gems, this Infinity Stone was also a hot potato, but if he had the opportunity to study and master the extraordinary ability of the space gem first, that would be a real step into the sky. Kale made up his mind and focused on the colorless card of the space gem. Begin drawing. Please maintain a distance of 3 centimeters from the item. You will continue to draw for 3 hours. Starting loading bar, 10799S, 10798S, Kale, maintain it at 3 centimeters and extract it for 3 hours? One had to know that the extraction time for a blue-grade item was only 3 seconds within 1 meter. Should I say that it's worthy of being colorless? Kale smiled bitterly. Holding the tesseract in his hand, he sat back on the sun chair and waited patiently. He didn't have a mission, so he could afford to wait. If he guessed correctly, colorless should be the highest quality card, and there was still a huge gap between it and purple. However, perhaps the Infinity Gloves with 6 gems would be of a colorless rare quality. Everything was still too far away. Kale thought uninterestedly as he waited for the card to finish counting down. 3 hours later. 3, 2, 1, extraction successful. Congratulations on obtaining the space gem. As the card was drawn in his mind, the blue light of the tesseract in Kale's hands suddenly dimmed a lot, as if the inner flame had been taken out of thin air, leaving only the remaining energy of the gems. At the same time, in Kale's exclusive card space. The moment the colorless card of the space gem entered, it immediately leaped up unstoppably, like a bright sun hanging at the highest point of the card space, overshadowing the brilliance of tens of thousands of cards in the 6 card areas in the space, declaring its supreme status. The card space should be the safest and most reliable storage place in the world. I'll put the space gem in there first. Kale's thought incarnation looked at the colorless card of the space gem in the card space and quickly withdrew from it. The space gem was not an existence that could exert the corresponding ability just by holding it. Now for him, it was like a child getting an energy weapon. Rashly using it without studying it would often result in trouble. Red Skull had personally demonstrated it to him. Kale's thought had just withdrawn from the card space when he found that the tesseract in his hand had begun to undergo subtle changes after losing the space gem. The most obvious change was that the color of the card information displayed in his eyes quickly changed from colorless to gold. Dropped in grade? Kale was stunned, looking at the tesseract in his hand that still had some blue light and mysterious aura, but was not as good as before. It was the colorless card of the tesseract. After the space gem was taken away, it fell into a brand new gold item card, and even the item name was changed. Tesseract Container, once a container of the space gem, one of the Infinity Gems, also known as the Infinite Cube. Gold item card. Remnants of the power of space can temporarily open a space door, but the existence of the space door is unstable and may cause the space to collapse at any time. After use, it will continue to be damaged. Current state, unable to draw, remnants of the space gem's power. Kale was silent for a moment, and finally shook his head and laughed. Interesting. This was an unexpected gain. Probably no one in the universe would have thought that there was the ability to directly take out the space gem without destroying the external tesseract container. Wait, why do I feel that this could be a trap for the future Thanos? Kyle stroked his smooth chin. The tesseract wasn't damaged in the slightest, and it still contained some residual energy from the space gem. Throwing this empty shell of the tesseract out of his hand could also save a lot of trouble. Thinking of this, Kale could not help but smile. He could already imagine it. In the future, when Thanos painstakingly obtained the magic cube, he crushed it and was about to embed the space gem into the Infinity Glove, only to find out that there was nothing inside. That eggplant-like face of his would turn ashen. Since he obtained the space gem, it would be the biggest gain of this battle, and Cale was not ready to continue to stay in the Atlantic Ocean. He looked at the vast sea in front of him and sighed. "Steve, it seems that we will really have to meet again in more than half a century. In fact, there is no need to worry, for you, this may be just a short nap. After you wake up, it will be the peaceful era that you often murmur about. I, who stayed, will be the one who will continue to move forward in this era of war." Cale's eyes became more and more determined, and he let venom cover his body, transforming it into a black combat suit, and summoned the Blue Eagle to return here. Carter was puzzled, but she still took the box from the soldier and asked, "Who is that person?" It was a little girl. She said she was Agent Carter's friend. The guards at the base didn't get to the bottom of it, so she ran away. "We only sent the box in after confirming that it was safe. Thank you for your hard work." Carter nodded. After the soldier left, she put the box on the conference table. The cardboard box was neither big nor small, and it was sealed with tape. There was a short paragraph in English on it, to Carter. Carter looked at the English handwriting with her beautiful eyes and was instantly stunned. Howard also felt that the atmosphere of the conference had been too heavy, so he couldn't help but tease, "Could this be a gift from a gentleman who admires you? Maybe it's intelligence. Let me help you open the box." Fry raised his hand and offered to help. After Carter agreed, he quickly took a pair of scissors and cut open the tape that sealed the box. The box was quickly opened by the tough guy. Under the dim yellow light, the contents of the box were revealed. It was a brand new folded red evening gown with a card with a rose on the front. Evening gown? Rose card? Fry was disappointed. He wasn't interested in women's items, so he immediately returned to his seat. Howard shrugged. "Looks like I was right. Beautiful Carter, do you need a bodyguard?" Carter didn't say anything. She walked forward and took the rose card from the box. After turning it over, the back of the card was still written in English. "Here is a solemn invitation to Miss Carter. On Friday, which is tomorrow at 8:00 in the evening, attend the Bird Club's singing and dancing party." "It's him. He's back," Carter said softly. "He's back?" Howard and Fry were slightly stunned. They looked at each other and then looked at her eagerly. "Who did you say is back?" A day passed, and Friday night arrived as expected. In the big city near the base, the Bird Club was located in the center of the busiest street. The main entrance was carpeted, and the lights maintained a romantic neon glow. Beep beep. An extended luxury car stopped steadily in front of the main entrance of the club. As the driver, Howard got out of the car first and opened the door of the front passenger seat in a gentlemanly manner. Slender feet stepped out in high heels, followed by Carter, who was wearing a luxurious tube-top evening gown, who got out of the car. Her beautiful and glamorous face was especially charming after carefully dressing up. Her blonde hair was combed up, revealing her delicate collarbone. Further down, the tube-top evening gown cleverly showed off her perfect shoulders and the lines of her body. It was sexy and elegant at the same time. The red evening gown contrasted with her fair skin, making it even harder for people to look away. "Carter, you'll definitely be the most dazzling person at the party tonight." Howard sighed and waved his hand to urge her. "Hurry up and go in. Don't let them wait too long." After that, Howard sat back in the driver's seat and started the limousine, leaving Carter standing alone in front of the door. Carter took a deep breath, pressed her palms lightly on her chest, and walked into the club nervously. Passing through the main entrance guarded by the formally dressed attendants, she walked all the way to the corridor. Inside, it was not as lively as usual. On the contrary, except for the faint lights in the corridor to maintain visibility, the club's singing and dancing main hall was dark. There was no music, no lights, and no other guests, not even the club's attendants. This. Carter looked at the silent and dark hall in front of her. Just as she was about to call out, the lights around and above her suddenly lit up. Whoosh! The originally dark main hall was instantly lit up. Following that, soft tunes played by a variety of musical instruments sounded. It was as if they had rehearsed this countless times. Couples of gentlemen and ladies held hands as they poured into the main hall from all directions and danced elegantly to the music. "Is that you?" Carter could not help but ask. She looked around at the people dancing to the tune, as if trying to find a familiar figure among them. "No." A familiar low voice sounded from the musician playing the tune. Carter looked at the source of the sound and saw a handsome young man in a black tuxedo stand up from the piano seat. "It's me. You must be very disappointed." Cale spread out his hands and looked at Carter in the center of the main hall. Chapter 53. Tobard Club, Main Hall. Classical lights hanging from the walls and ceiling illuminated the ballroom, and beautiful music flowed like water in the hall. Couples of gentlemen in suits and ladies in gowns danced, immersed in this entertainment place far away from the smoke of war. If the club here was not directly booked, and professional dancers were dressed as guests, Cale in a tuxedo would definitely cause a heated crowd and sensation when he appeared in the ballroom. Cale, the youngest major officer in the United States, was a hero who symbolized American strength and conquest. Since the Hydra organization was uprooted and eradicated, he once again became a legendary figure in the streets of Europe and the United States. Although it was too exaggerated to describe him as a legend, he could single-handedly affect the situation of the entire European battlefield and hurt Germany, which had a strong military power in World War II. In the eyes of the American soldiers and some fanatical fangirls, Cale was a veritable legendary hero, and his reputation and prestige were even far beyond that of generals and officers. Now Europe was okay. Today in the United States, 6 out of 10 of the promotional videos for the domestic conscription must be exclusive to Cale, and the other 4 were war records of Cale and Captain Steve fighting side by side. One could imagine how powerful Cale's halo as a war hero was now. Hope dimmed and lit again, and the confident young man came back as promised. Carter, standing in the middle of the ballroom, looked at Cale, who came out of the separated singing and dancing crowd, and was speechless for a while. Cale also remained silent, and didn't know what to say. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, "Sorry, I didn't bring Steve back." As soon as these words came out, the relaxed and cheerful atmosphere suddenly solidified and became heavy. Carter took a few steps forward, shook her head and said, "It's not all your fault, we couldn't predict what would happen on the plane. No, it's because I underestimated Schmidt. I thought." Before Cale could finish, Carter shook her head at him again and said slowly, "That's enough. It's all over now." After saying that, Carter extended her hand slightly forward. There was a hint of anticipation in the depths of her beautiful eyes. Her red lips parted slightly. "Didn't Steve ask you to come on his behalf to invite me to a dance? Why are you only here now?" "It's been 2 weeks. It's a bit far out at sea, so I'm late." Cale casually found an excuse. After a moment of hesitation, he imitated Howard's gentlemanly gesture and reached out his hand to hold Carter's soft hand. "If you don't know how to dance, I can teach you." "Just don't step on my shoes," Carter said, and was about to lead Cale to dance slowly to the tune in the hall. "There's no need for that." Cale couldn't help but laugh. In this world, there weren't many common skills that he didn't know. Even if there were, he could just read the card directly. Especially the green, party dance, ability card, which he had drawn from Carter, but he hadn't had a chance to use it yet. Just then, the gentle tune in the hall stopped, and another hurried and passionate song began to play. Kyle directly took the initiative and began to lead the dance with exquisite dancing skills that were not inferior to professional dancers. Under the exquisite control of his strength, he held Carter's waist with one hand and slightly lifted her into the air as he spun and danced. Carter quickly kept up with the pace, her red dress fluttering in the wind. A hint of surprise flashed in her beautiful eyes. She didn't expect Kale to be so proficient in dancing other than fighting and killing on the battlefield. Kale held Carter's hand with one hand and her slender waist with the other. He began to dance to the increasingly passionate tune. With his strong and perfect body, wearing a tuxedo naturally made him look like a thin gentleman in a greenhouse in the city. He lost some of the coldness and killing intent of the black combat uniform, and gained some gentleness and handsomeness. Paired with the cool and beautiful Carter tonight, the appearance itself was pleasing to the eye. In addition, the two's dance movements were energetic and neat, and they cooperated well. Difficult movements were easily completed, and each of their hand movements and steps were in tune with the tune of the song. Kale and Carter had occupied the center of the ballroom, and the surrounding people's eyes fell on them with amazement and admiration. When the song ended, Kale slowly held Carter's slender waist and steadied her body. Carter pressed her palms lightly on his broad chest. As if they were amazed by the high degree of completeness of the dance, the people in the ballroom applauded. "It's over." Kale shrugged and withdrew his hands. A hint of disappointment flashed in Carter's beautiful eyes. She could only slowly put down her hands and said in surprise, "I didn't expect you to know how to dance. I learned it from my parents at home before I joined the army." Kale answered casually and said straightforwardly, "Is there anything else you want to do? I happen to be free tonight. Are you preparing to go to the front line tomorrow? Oh right, you haven't reported back to the base for half a month." Carter pondered for a moment, then gathered her courage and said, "Then, let's go drink." "Drink, you and me?" Kale looked at Carter in surprise. Wasn't this usually reserved for brothers in arms? Why would a man and a woman drink? He thought for a moment and said with hesitation, "You can't really like me like Steve said, right?" Carter was stunned. She avoided Kale's gaze and waved her hand. "How could that be? You're thinking too much." "That's good." Kale breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "I knew it. Steve lied to me in the end. Even if he didn't say that, I would still take care of you. I don't need you to take care of me." Carter glanced at him and said in a much colder tone, "Are you going to drink or not?" Kale nodded. "Drink. It's rare for me to relax." "Why not drink? Just don't get drunk. I can't help someone as big as you." Carter snorted. "Are you kidding? How could that be?" Kale shook his head disinterestedly. This worry didn't exist at all. His super soldier body's metabolism was 4 times that of a human's. How could mere alcohol make him drunk? The next morning, a breeze blew the white gauze curtains, and the dazzling golden sunlight shone into the room. Kale gradually woke up from the bed. His head was still a little dizzy with the slight aftereffects of last night's drunkenness. He was really drunk. Kyle smiled bitterly as he lay in bed with his arms and legs spread out. It was too embarrassing for a super soldier. He thought that he wouldn't get drunk, so he kept tasting different wines with high alcohol content. When he realized that he was drunk, it was already too late. However, this was also because he was in the resting stage. It didn't matter if he got drunk once to eliminate the pressure of war. If he was waiting for war or during a mission, he wouldn't even touch a sip of alcohol. Speaking of which, I really troubled Carter last night. Kale pulled the sheets and looked at the swallow-tailed uniform on his body. It was replaced by the simple pajamas provided by the club. He vaguely remembered that Carter and a few other attendants spent a lot of effort to help him into the room last night. It seemed that Carter also helped to take off his clothes. Chapter 54. What's the saying? Oh, drunken sex. Kale quickly got up and looked at the bed, the floor, and the bathroom. He didn't find any women's clothes and was secretly relieved. It's good that nothing happened last night. He didn't want to help the frozen Steve take care of her and end up in bed. But where did the tuxedo he was wearing go? Yesterday was a rest time, and Kale didn't let Venom transform into a dress uniform. Last time, he almost exposed himself out of curiosity. Instead, he turned Venom into a card and put on real clothes. This also led to the fact that he didn't know what happened after he got drunk last night. Maybe the waiter took it to wash. Kale didn't care. It was just a piece of clothing, and it wasn't a very expensive thing. He simply washed his body in the bathroom, and after putting on his underwear, he took out the Venom card from the card space and threw it on the bed to make it materialize. Gurgle, Venom moved in the quilt, and the black lines formed by its own liquid drooped down humanely, as if it was telling Kale something aggrieved. It got used to fusing in symbiosis with Kale on the battlefield, and it became more and more obsessed with this symbiotic state. In other words, all creatures subconsciously yearn for evolution. And Venom's symbiotic race itself relied on the fusion and symbiosis with other creatures to gradually learn the physical abilities of the host, so as to achieve the evolutionary process of improving its own strength. Okay, it's time to go back to the base, Kale said as he stretched out his hand towards Venom. Venom's liquid body suddenly turned into countless black lines happily, extending along his palm to his body, entangling, wrapping, and finally transforming. Kale looked at the full set of black clothes on his body and patted the logo on his chest. It's not a combat suit, let's change into something more casual first. Swish, like the camouflage of a chameleon, Kale's combat suit quickly changed into a jacket and jeans. Carrying Venom on his body every day has such a benefit, it can save money on clothes and the trivial time of changing clothes. Out of the room, Kale walked in the corridor of the club, and the waiters along the way greeted him with a fawning greeting. For the VIP with military power and wealth, they couldn't wait for Kale to come every day and hold a party. Seeing that he was about to walk out of the club's main entrance, Kale seemed to think of something and stopped a passing waitress and asked, "Let me ask you something, where is the lady who danced with me last night?" "Mr. Kale, you're talking about Miss Carter." The waitress hurriedly stopped in her tracks and answered, "Miss Carter left the club alone early today." "Is that so? She didn't wait for me to return to the base." Kale shook his head, his left hand reached into his wallet pocket and materialized something under the cover of the pocket. He quickly took out a club card and handed it to the waitress. "This is the VIP card I opened here last night. There should be more than $9,000 in it. In the future, when Carter comes here to dance again, all the expenses will be covered by this card." "Okay." The waitress bowed her head and took the VIP card with both hands. When she looked up again, she found that Kale had walked out of the main entrance, leaving her with a tall and cold back. Training Base Basement, Scientific Research Department. Kale's front foot had just walked through the door when a strong explosion was accompanied by a familiar figure in a research suit. The figure was thrown to the ground by the blast wave, and smoke was still coming out of his body. "Howard, you're still the same." Kale stared at the scientific gentleman lying on the ground with a strange expression. Kale? The gentleman was stunned when he saw Kale at the door. He immediately rubbed his eyes, and after confirming that there was no mistake, he excitedly climbed up from the ground. "Kale, you're finally back." Howard quickly stepped forward. Due to his height, he could only hug Kyle's belt a little. He said agitatedly, "If you didn't come back, I wouldn't be in the mood to go to banquets and bars during this period of time. You're not only my friend and comrade, but also the best partner to create the top industry with me in the future." The last sentence is the key. You haven't finished studying the thing I gave you. Don't think you can get some black technology from me. Kale ridiculed and pushed him away to prevent Howard from looking at him. "Ha ha ha. If it wasn't for Carter's request to go alone last night, I wouldn't have been able to resist going into the club to see you," Howard said with a smile. He was sincerely happy that his friend in front of him could come back. You know that the box was from me?" Kale looked at Howard in surprise. This was a ball gown, a rose card, and so on. Most people would think that it was another gentleman who admired Carter. At the very least, they would think that Steve was back. Howard said cheerfully, "You underestimate Agent Carter." She recognized the English handwriting on the box and the card at a glance. "Is that so?" Cale went silent. Last night's scenes flashed through his mind and he realized that he might have missed something. "Oh right, didn't the beauty Carter come back with you? Could it be?" Howard's gaze became strange. It was similar to studying scientific strategies, filled with the curiosity of a gentleman. "Don't misunderstand. Last night, nothing happened between her and me. I thought she went back to the base a long time ago." Cale waved his hand a little guiltily and changed the topic. "Oh right, when I entered the training base, I noticed that there were fewer soldiers stationed there. Where did Fry run off to?" "Oh, you just came back to the base, so you don't know the current situation." Howard suddenly realized and said with a serious face, "The leaders of our army, Britain, and the Soviet Union decided at the alliance meeting not long ago to take advantage of Germany's crushing defeat on the front lines to gather their forces and attack Germany from the English Channel." The alliance of the three countries attacking Germany? Starting from the English Channel? The Normandy landing. The name of this battle flashed through Cale's mind. He never thought that the Marvel world would be so similar to the history of the world in his previous life and walk down the same path of war. The Normandy landing was a historical large-scale battle at the end of World War II. After this battle, Germany was completely conquered and surrendered. Only the Japanese on the Asian battlefield were left to bitterly hold on. Howard continued, "Last night, we have already conveyed the message of your return to the headquarters. General Chester replied and ordered you to hurry to the UA base in Europe after returning to the training base. That really didn't let me have any free time." Cale shrugged. His blue eyes revealed a dangerous coldness. His body and Venom suit were quietly excited. Chapter 55. "Speaking of which, where were you during the half a month you were missing?" Howard asked Cale in confusion. Cale hesitated for a moment and quickly replied, "Steve sank the lost fighter into the sea alone. I parachuted in advance and landed on a barren island in the shape of a turtle in the Atlantic Ocean. I rested there for a while." "A barren island in the shape of a turtle?" Howard murmured and had a new question, "Then how did you come back?" He didn't know that Cale had a card space with him. Not to mention the means of transportation across the sea, he had planes, tanks, villas, food, etc. There was a mutated giant eagle beast on the barren island. After I tamed it, I let it carry me back." Cale spread out his hands and said. He had answered many questions to cover up the existence of the card space, so he was unusually good at answering them. A barren island in the shape of a turtle and a mutated monster. It seems that your luck is really good. Howard nodded and smiled. He didn't delve further. This industrial partner of his was not an ordinary person. Since he had studied the mobile phone and the supercomputer system program chip that Cale gave him, his mind was more and more convinced of this judgment. It was precisely because of this that Howard would feel lucky to be Cale's friend. He could use this to avoid detours in the field of science and technology for a few decades. Cale looked at the smile on Howard's face and nodded thoughtfully. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Howard, this old gentleman, was not as simple as a Frankenstein. He could deal with the important scientific strategy department of the military and his own private Stark Industries. He was also a sensible person. He knew what to ask and what not to ask. The relationship between the two of them. Through the comrades in arms in the military, daily friends, and private business partners, under the two-line maintenance of interests and friendship, they would never do anything to harm each other. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were close friends. It seemed that there were some things that he could discuss with the person in front of him without worry. Cale made up his mind. He looked at Howard and said, "That turtle-shaped island is in the center of the Atlantic Ocean. The location and environment are very good. After the war is over, if you can find a good construction engineer or company, I might be able to use it. World War II is still going on, and you're already thinking about what will happen after the war. Howard blinked, but quickly fell into deep thought. He pondered and said, "Do you want to develop it into villas and apartments after the war is over, or something like a fortress? It's a casual fortress that can withstand the bombardment of missiles, firearms, and so on. No matter how much it is, it will all be deducted from the dividends of Stark Industries," Cale said directly. Howard nodded and agreed without hesitation. "All right then, I've also minored in construction engineering. When the war is over, I'll go with you to that turtle-shaped island. I'll arrange for people to build it. Then I'll have to trouble you." Cale's eyes showed a slight sense of expectation. Not to mention that the war was still far from over. When the upcoming Normandy landing campaign was over, it wouldn't take long for the world to return to peace. The turtle-shaped island that he had been talking about was naturally the only purple creature card in the card space, super large ancient dragon turtle. Ever since he drew that card, Cale began to have an idea, to create his own fortress base and family force. In the future, no matter how high his military rank was, even if he was a general, he would only be an officer in the UA who followed orders. Even if he was the future director of SHELD, and had the strongest elite force under his command, he would still be suppressed by various treaties and his power would be taken away by various hidden enemies. Although Cale believed that he would be stronger in the future, he didn't want to always fight alone. If he could build his own elite force in advance, or even establish a legendary family in the world of Marvel, that would be the real future. So, now that Kyle had told Howard about the construction of the fortress in advance, it was the first step towards creating the family's influence in the future. Howard could guess some of Cale's intentions, but he wouldn't disclose this information to anyone. On the contrary, he would keep Cale's secret and do his best to help build the fortress base in the future. This was the tacit understanding and trust between the two men. "I'll keep an eye on the construction team for you from now on. You're about to go to the UA military base to prepare for the battle. I made you a new piece of equipment that should be useful," Howard said, waved his hand, and took Cale into the storage area of the laboratory. It was the usual air-delivered storage box. Howard opened it on the table and two overlapping black round objects lay in the box. "This thing is the crystallization of my anti-gravity research for so many years. It took me half a month to make two pieces. It can't be mass-produced." Before Howard could explain, Cale's attention fell on the two magnet-like round objects and instantly got the corresponding item card information. Gravity magnet, 2 gravity magnets, 1 positive and 1 negative. Blue item card. Gravity magnet, made of fine anti-gravity research parts, can change the gravitational field in a small area when it touches the ground. When the positive gravity magnet falls on the ground, the gravitational force of the area within a radius of 10 meters will double. When the anti-gravity magnet falls on the ground, the gravitational force of the area within a radius of 10 meters will double. When the two positive and negative magnets touch the ground at the same time, the effect will be offset. The positive and negative gravity magnets will attract each other. If one is thrown on the ground, the other can be sucked back. Cale picked up the gravity magnets and tried to throw one of them into the open space at his feet. Pa! The moment the anti-gravity magnet fell on the ground, the gravity in the lab suddenly doubled. Howard was still explaining how to use it, but because of the doubled gravity, he immediately lost his balance and sat directly on the floor. "Not bad." Cale nodded and commented. Even he could feel some resistance around his body. The increase in the gravitational field indirectly doubled his weight. Ordinary people would not be able to withstand it. Cale aimed the positive and negative magnets in his hand at the magnet on the ground. Under the attraction of the positive and negative magnets, the magnetic magnet immediately flew away from the ground and the gravitational field in the lab returned to normal. Howard wiped the sweat off his forehead, stood up, and concluded, the increase or decrease of the gravitational field doesn't make much of a difference to the physical fitness of your super soldiers. However, once ordinary soldiers suddenly fall into the gravitational field that is doubled or decreased, they will be a little overwhelmed and lose part of their combat ability. I'll take this. Also, I have something for you to study. Take it as a gift to the country. Kale said as he put the backpack he had been carrying on his back on the table. As soon as the zipper was opened, the blue light inside slowly seeped out. Chapter 56. Europe's British coastal area, the U.S. military's temporary base. After the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union decided to form an alliance and invade Germany together, in less than a month, the American temporary base had expanded more than 5 times its original size. Countless temporary military tents were set up inside the base. The U.S. military forces that were once distributed on the front lines in Europe all received the order of the 5-star general to gather here. More weapons and ammunition were being transported here day and night. And this was only the preparation stage of the U.S. fleet. In addition to most soldiers crossing the strait through ships and landing directly on Germany opposite the British coast, there were also thousands of Air Force fighter jets busy preparing in other bases. This was the eve of a super large-scale battle. More than 100,000 U.S. soldiers were the main force and temporarily camped in the base, waiting for the time to gather and attack. At this time, in the temporary U.S. base, teams of shirtless U.S. soldiers were exercising in the vast open space of the camp. Under the direct sunlight at noon, the atmosphere was full of hormones. Major Kale's plane is about to arrive. The hero that symbolizes the strength and conquest of the U.S. is coming to our base. No one knew who first spread this kind of news, but it quickly became a sensational and powerful hurricane that swept through the entire U.S. base. Kale is here. This demonic slogan that could instantly stop the naughty behavior and crying of German children, in the ears of the U.S. people and soldiers, had another almost fanatical effect of group encouragement. In just half a minute, almost all the UA soldiers who had nothing to do rushed to the shutdown area of the HQ. For a moment, half of the roads inside the HQ were filled with flying dust. Joseph, who was also in the base, opened the doors and windows of the officers' conference room. He looked at the fanatical soldiers outside the window and couldn't help but sigh. Kale, that kid, is really amazing. As long as he's here, the morale of the entire base will soar. This is the charm of a war hero. Brandt sat in his office seat gloomily and stared blankly at the base that had suddenly become lively. He pursed his lips and didn't make a sound. Joseph blinked and said, "Brandt, are you still troubled by the previous conflict? I believe Kale has long forgotten about that small matter." Of course he forgot. Brandt shook his head and said angrily, "I'm still a second lieutenant. He's already a major and an American hero. It's my honor to compete with an American hero in marksmanship." Joseph sighed inwardly, knowing that Brandt was still unable to let go of the past during his training. Indeed, a recruit that he didn't think highly of used less than a year to make half the world remember his name. This was really too damaging to the reputation of a recruit instructor. But who could be blamed for this? Then I'll go and take a look. It's very dusty outside. You can stay in the room. After Joseph finished speaking, he put on his hat and walked out of the meeting room, closing the door and windows. Brandt was left alone in the office. He wanted to complain, but in the end, all the words he wanted to say turned into a sigh. Originally, 2 American heroes could have emerged from the recruits he taught at the same time, in the shutdown area of the main base. The transport jet hummed as it slid down from the end of the runway and stopped on the ground. 4 soldiers with guns jumped down from the door first. After they lowered the stairs, they stood face to face in the open space in front of the jet door. Kale stepped on the stairs lowered by the fuselage and walked out of the transport jet. He wore his usual black and cold special combat suit. 2 small energy pistols were tied to the outside of his legs. A sodium-carbon steel sword with a leather sheath hung on his back. The combat suit had a devil's cross symbol on the chest and the UA Major's insignia on the left shoulder. The sun outside was very glaring. Kale originally wanted to block the sun with his hand, but as soon as he walked out of the transport jet and looked straight ahead, he was slightly stunned in the next moment. Tens of thousands of UA soldiers in military combat suits stood in the large open space next to the transport jet. There was no end in sight at a glance. When they saw Kale, they didn't make any disrespectful actions such as cheering or whistling. Instead, they quickly raised their hands and clapped with love and respect on their faces. The waves of applause converged into thunder and resounded over the main base. "Kale, you're finally back." From the crowd of soldiers, a black officer wearing a left eye patch squeezed out and walked excitedly toward Kale. "You said I'm a war maniac, how can I not be in a large-scale war?" Kale shrugged, hugged Fry, and patted each other's back. "Hiss, your strength has improved a lot, use less strength." Fry took a deep breath and took half a step back. "It's a so-so," Kale said with a smile. The physique of a super soldier was fixed at a peak and could not be improved through exercise. Fry felt that the increase in strength came only from the continuous growth of the venom suit on his body. "Kale." A loud voice sounded, and Joseph also squeezed out of the crowd of soldiers with some effort. "Instructor Joseph, you're here too." Kale nodded to him and asked, "You often go back to New York, how is Lucy now?" "She's fine, I've already spoken to the local police station, don't worry," Joseph said with a smile. "Thank you, next time you go back, please help me bring something back to her." Kale nodded. He didn't forget Lucy who lived in his home, but the battlefield had been in Europe and there was not much time to return to New York. "No problem," Joseph agreed. Fry urged, "Kale, I'm not just here to pick you up, I'm also here with General Chet's orders. He asked me to go to the base command room to see him immediately after you arrive at the main base. General Chet, the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces in this battle." Kale nodded and immediately let Fry lead the way. Kale walked forward, and the crowd of soldiers suddenly separated, making a smooth path. Except for the soldiers of the original training base, the 102nd Regiment, and the Roaring Commandos, the rest of the frontline troops and the new recruits had never seen Kale before. At this time, seeing the war hero in person, their hearts were surging. Chapter 57. With Fry leading the way, Kale followed him to the command room of the U.S. General Base. "You can go in, I'm just helping to pass on a message." Fry stopped at the door of the command room and motioned for Kale to go in alone. "Okay, I'll find you later." Kale nodded and walked directly into the command room without any stage fright. The room was monotonous and simple, with a huge strategic map as a decorative background banner, and the U.S. flag with stripes and stars. A middle-aged officer was sitting behind a military desk piled with documents. The middle-aged officer looked to be in his early 40s, with a dignified and tough face. He was wearing a full officer's uniform, and the left chest of the uniform was clearly pinned with the noble rank of general with 5 stars on it. 5-star general. The highest-ranking general in the U.S. during World War II, and the supreme commander of the Tri-Nation Alliance this time. Kale looked at the general in front of him, stood firmly on his feet, gave a standard salute, and said loudly, "Major Kale, here to report." General Chester looked up and his sharp eyes looked up and down at Kale, who was standing within 3 meters of him, and then nodded with a gentle smile, "Major Kale, you're finally back." Kale nodded and said, "Yes, in the Battle of the Alps, there was an accident in the end when we were chasing Hydra's leader, Schmidt. Steve lost control of the fighter plane and fell into the sea, and I parachuted back in advance to escape." "Steve. I've already read the telegram sent by Agent Carter for the specific details." General Chester sighed regretfully and said to Kale, "Your safe return is already the greatest victory for our army." At the critical moment of World War II, war heroes can't fall easily. General Chester paused for a moment and said meaningfully, "Actually, I've wanted to see you for a long time. You know, the super soldier experiment was originally completed under my orders. You refused the pioneer experiment of the super soldier and gave the opportunity to Steve, who was in the same camp. This is still fresh in my memory." Cale was embarrassed and shrugged. "About this, I can only say that I was too proud at the time and didn't cherish the opportunity to become a super soldier. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to become the second super soldier by coincidence. It turns out that you have the capital to be proud." General Chester shook his head gently and said in a deep voice, "After Steve became the only super soldier, I was also very optimistic about the justice and iron will of the United States in him, so I specially taught him combat skills. Although it was beyond my expectations that Steve could become Captain America, it was still within my expectations. But you, Cale, from a recruit in the training base to creating miracles on the frontline battlefield, step by step, through your own strength to become the hero who dominates the battlefield today, it is far beyond my imagination." After General Chester finished speaking, he looked at Cale with undisguised admiration. "Luck, it's all luck," Cale said modestly. The general had praised him to the heavens, so it was rare for him to keep a low profile. "If it's all luck, then I hope the goddess spent all her luck on you," General Chester joked. General Chester teased, and then said seriously, "Yesterday, after knowing that you returned safely to the training base, I specially contacted the president to discuss your matter." "Discuss me?" Kyle was slightly taken aback as he waited for General Chester's next words. General Chester said seriously, "I suggested that you be promoted to Major General as an exception, and the president has already agreed." Major General? Cale was completely stunned this time. What did Major General mean? It was the rank of a general. Although he had previously jumped from a recruit to a corporal, then from a corporal to a second lieutenant, then from a second lieutenant to a major, the jump this time was simply too shocking. It had to be known that every time a major was promoted, it required a large amount of time and accumulation of military merits, and Cale had only been promoted to major for less than a month. "General Chester, I don't think I've accumulated enough military merits to be promoted to Major General yet," Cale said with a bit of hesitation. "Ha, if it's just based on military merits, then even if I work hard for 50 years, I'll only be a 4-star general at most." General Chester laughed and reminded Cale, "This is the Second World War, there are exceptions to everything." "That's right. There was only one 5-star general in the United States during World War II." Cale nodded thoughtfully. General Chester continued, "Those peacetime military rules don't apply here. As long as you can lead the war to victory, you can even become a 5-star general, let alone a major general. It's just a major general, there's no reason why I don't dare to take it." Cale nodded confidently and threw out his last concern, "It's just that I'm better at fighting alone on the battlefield than commanding soldiers. Isn't it a bit too extravagant to give me the title of Major General?" "It's not extravagant at all." General Chester smiled and answered, "With your reputation as a war hero, even if you were to make an exception and be promoted to Major General, all of our soldiers would raise both hands in approval. More importantly, in the upcoming battle against Germany, our army will be leading the battle against the Allies. You are a hero of our generation, but your status as a major will inevitably be looked down upon by some officers from other countries." Hearing this, Cale quickly understood. General Chester made an exception to promote him to Major General not just for him, but for the face of the entire country and the army. A hero who symbolized the strength of the country and was only a major? That wouldn't do, he had to be at least a general to have face. General Chester finally said slowly, "The part of the army you command can be handed over to an officer you trust enough to take command. If there are no other questions, you'll be a Major General from now on. The corresponding rank badge can be handed over to you now. I'll also help you submit the relevant information." This promotion news will be spread before our army meets up with the Allied army. General, you've already arranged everything, so why should I refuse? Kale spread his hands. This was a major general rank being forced on him, there was no reason not to accept. 5 minutes later, Kale left the command room speechlessly. Fry had been waiting outside the command room the whole time. When he saw Kale come out, he immediately went up to greet him. Hey, Kale. What's wrong? You look unhappy. See for yourself. Kale lifted his left shoulder expressionlessly. Your major rank, how did it become 1 star? Fury's words came to an abrupt halt as he rubbed his right eye. He widened his eyes and bitterly said, Is there something wrong with my other eye? Why do I see the insignia of a major general? You didn't see wrong. It's a major general, Kale said uninterestedly. Chapter 58. 3 days later, the time for the Allied forces of the 3 countries to assemble and land on the enemy's coast was approaching. In the early morning, dozens of large steel ships were anchored near the coast of the United Kingdom, waiting for the main force of the UA base to board first. At this time, in the sea area slightly ahead of the group of ships, a giant battleship stretched across the sea like an overlord. The flagpole with stripes and stars fluttered in the wind. The hull was under the protection of multiple steel armor layers, loaded with high-speed and powerful anti-aircraft firepower. It was like a steel castle standing in the sea. At the bow of the deck of this giant battleship, Kale stood alone in the fence. In addition to the black battle suit transformed by venom, he also wore a general's coat that represented his identity, making him look cold and majestic. Kyle was probably the only one who dared to wear a general's coat like that. The wind on the sea blew in his face, lifting up his fine blonde hair and the sleeves of his general's coat. Ta-ta-ta, hurried footsteps came from behind Kale. Lieutenant Fry stood still and saluted, reporting. The captain of the ship, the Navy, the accompanying medical staff, and the land combat soldiers have all boarded the battleship. Major General Kale, please give the next instructions. Kale nodded, very good, let them prepare for battle on the ship first. There is still half a day before the attack. Yes. Fry saluted and turned to leave. When he turned back and was about to leave, he turned back and said with a bitter face, Kale, are you the Major General or am I the Major General? It was fine when you were in the assault on the Roaring Team, but now you are a general, there is no reason to leave the management to me. Isn't this the case of capable people doing more work? Kale shrugged and glanced back at Fry with a smile, you know, I am not very good at commanding. When I was in charge of the assault on the Roaring Team, you were in charge of the soldiers, let alone the 3,000 soldiers this time. Also, this is to train your mental endurance as soon as possible. The future of SHELD is what you need to worry about. Kale murmured the last sentence. What are you talking about? The wind is strong, I can't hear you clearly. Fry asked in surprise. Kale stretched his back and waved his hand, urging him to leave. Fry, I'll leave all the military arrangements to you. Hurry up and go. Wait till my military rank surpasses yours, then you'll see how I'll order you around. Fry clenched his teeth and left with a dark expression. He was just venting his emotions. Surpassing Kale in terms of military rank? That was impossible. Within a year, he had gone from a recruit to a major general. The title of being the youngest major general in history was no longer enough to describe how exaggerated this was. However, 3 days ago, the news of the promotion had spread throughout the American base. Not only did the countless American soldiers in the camp not have any objections, they even felt that it was reasonable. The American hero who symbolized strength and conquest, the soldier who forced the German army to withdraw from the European frontline battlefield, and the greatest contributor to the elimination of the Hydra organization in one fell swoop. Only a major? No face at all. A major general was normal. It had to be said that the soldiers of the entire American army were bragging. If anyone dared to slander them, their comrades in the same camp would probably turn against them. Why does it feel like I'm the spokesperson of war? Kale touched his chin and yawned slightly towards the sea in front of him. There was still some time to prepare for the war. His body felt a lot more relaxed due to the boredom. It was better to go back to the control center of the ship and look at the strategic map. Kale thought so and slowly walked away from the deck. However, at the corner of the passage down the stairs, a petite female military doctor unexpectedly bumped into him head-on. Kale frowned slightly. Although his body was relaxed, his reaction speed as a super soldier was not fake. He cleverly dodged to the side, brushing past the military doctor who was about to fall to the ground. Then, he reached back and grabbed the back of the doctor's collar. Wah! The female military doctor screamed in panic. When she came to her senses, she was lifted up by Kale like a kitten by the collar. Are you okay? Kale asked and slowly put the other party on the ground. The female military doctor was so scared that her face was a little pale. Her legs softened as she sat down on the floor of the passage inside the ship. She shook her short light red hair and said timidly, I'm okay, I'm okay. A woman? A military doctor accompanying the army? Kale glanced at the female military doctor on the ground. She looked at most 16 years old. Her body had not fully developed. After all, her chest had just started to bulge. However, it still could not hide the fact that she was a little beauty. Reddish hair, white skin, delicate face, slender figure, and a white military doctor's dress. With a pitiful and delicate expression, she looked like she would make people want to protect her. Of course, Kale was not a lolicon. He was not interested in a girl whose body had not yet matured. However, when he focused his attention, the ability cards that appeared on the girl's body aroused his interest. First aid proficiency, ballet proficiency, English proficiency. Well, there was nothing wrong with these ability cards. However, there was still true assassination proficiency, true pistol proficiency, true disguise proficiency, close combat proficiency, Soviet secret signal proficiency, psychological tactics proficiency. Well, forget about the above. However, other than these dozens of green ability cards, the female military doctor also had a very important card. Super Agent, the constitution of a super agent above the top agents, super soldier version. Blue ability card. After genetic modification, it will greatly slow down the speed of aging and strengthen the immune system and resistance to attacks. It will also obtain the top physical strength, speed, reaction, and intelligence of a normal human. It will maintain its combat state for a long time. Current status, can be drawn. Cannot be used at the same time as the super soldier ability. Interesting. Kale whispered softly. His eyes lit up as he looked at the female military doctor on the ground. Interesting? The female military doctor was stunned. Then, she pitifully covered her slender calf. Her white skin was scratched and some blood was flowing out. She timidly took a deep breath and said, General Kale, can I trouble you to send me to the ship's medical room? Kale didn't reply. He asked, What's your name? My name is Satana. The female military doctor said weakly. Satana. Kale repeated her name. He quickly smiled and nodded. He reached out his hand. Just when Satana thought that Kale was going to help her up, Kale directly waved at the Navy soldier passing by not far away. Come here and send this military doctor to the medical room. Yes, General Kale. The Navy soldier quickly obeyed and quickly stepped forward. He helped Satana away from the scene. It wasn't until the two disappeared from the ship's corridor that a trace of coldness appeared on Kale's face. Soviet Union, Secret Service Red Room. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.